All right. Well, we are live here, and this is all going to get edited out anyway, so it doesn't really matter what we say at this point,
Nice.
or what we do. And literally, no one's watching. No one will ever see this intro. So, why don't we just wait for people to come on? Hey, dude, did I tell you that I'm farm sitting?
Yeah. Are you right now? You are?
That's where I am right now. Yeah.
Oh, sweet.
I'm in
I saw
Tennessee.
a picture of one of your children with a chicken. Sweet.
Yeah, we've got chickens, we've got goats, we've got roosters, which is chickens. We've got billy goats, which have their own separate thing. We've got, what are the female goats called? Nana goats?
I don't know.
We've got nanny goats. We've got, I just made that up. That sounds right, though.
A nanny goat.
We've got, what else? Turkeys. Oh, dude, get this. There is a turkey. Hey, here's a question for you. Here's a real something for your fancy philosophy. There is a chicken who was rejected by the other chickens. Straight reject, like something out of a storybook.
Yeah.
And the turkeys took her in.
That's awesome.
So she's this gray chicken. She wanders around and she tries to make turkey noises too.
I think chickens they've probably been bred down. They're probably real dumb, right? They probably they've been bred down throughout millennia. And I think that they do this often because I saw a video of a duck family that took in a chicken. And the chicken's out there in the water floating, looks so stupid, but it thinks it's a duck.
No.
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah, it's so good.
This chicken, well, I will say, actually, it's funny because chickens might be dumb, but turkeys are uber dumb.
Yeah, that's right here. You got to take them inside when it rains.
Yeah, they are like, so the turkey will get out of the fence. It'll fly up, which the chicken has a harder time doing, but they'll fly up over the fence. And then they don't realize, well, I just flew over the fence. I can very easily just fly back. Yeah. Instead, they try to walk through the fence. So they just walk up to go bagong, 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 bagong. And the chicken is a little smarter. It doesn't get caught in these conundrums. So we have this whole story worked out where the chicken was too stupid for the other chickens. It was ugly. It's kind of an ugly gray chicken, but it's but if I go to the turkeys, I can be queen of the turkeys. They will respect me, and they'll never even know that I'm not one of them. They'll just think I'm like a super turkey.
This is the plot of Idiocracy. You've just rediscovered the.
It's idiocracy.
Yeah. That's what
it is. It's happening in real time, but it's hilarious because this chicken has been adopted by the turkey, and it kind of walks like all the other chickens. If you walk up close to them, they go like this.
Yeah.
This one does not do it. It tries to make turkey noises. It'll go like, but it's still a chicken.
Yeah.
It's so
good.
It's really funny. It's you almost get the sense where it's do not blow my cover. I am a turkey.
Yeah. I fit in here. Not again. Yeah.
Okay. Got a few people watching. Let me just give a quick introduction to what we're talking about, Poe.
Yeah.
All right. Well, welcome to our live conversation about AI, mind, and God. And if you don't know who we are, my name is Joel Settecase, and I'm here with my brother Parker Settecase. And if you're watching this on live stream or you're watching live, you can actually comment as we go. You can drop a comment below, and we'd love to hear from you. I would love to hear from you anyway. And my brother,
I don't care to hear from you. Yeah,
he's more of an echo chamber kind of guy. So don't challenge
buzzwords. Yeah, that's great. Good start.
He's but just make sure that you mention that we are a psychosomatic unity, and that is irrefutable. Anyway, drop your comment below, and we'll do all the plugs for the the different organizations that we work for. Like mine's very legit. Yours is sort of more
a front.
Well, yeah.
A scheme of some sort.
Yeah. But anyway, if you have been watching, we started out by talking. I'm farm sitting right now, so I'm down in Tennessee. Normally, I'm up in St. Charles area of Illinois. I have my whole studio, but I'm farm sitting. I'm in Tennessee. We've got chickens. We've got goats. We've got the boy goats that pee on their own faces. We've got
why?
We've got. It's always good to when you're in a conversation. You always want to say funny stuff up front because it
Let's
adds
keep going.
levity.
Let's get to it. Yeah, that's
all
great.
Right, let's get started. No one watches the first part anyway. Okay. All right, let's get into it. So we're talking today about AI, mind, and God. And Parker, you obviously talk about this stuff all the time on your YouTube channel and podcast. And so set the agenda. What are we talking about? What do we need to know about AI, mind, and God?
Yeah, so I thought we could talk about the history of AI to get us situated. What is this thing? What does it refer to? What are its goals? Real quick, I think we can do that. Get us up to speed, and then we can start talking about like the mind of it all. Like, could AI have a mind? Is that even possible? And what kind of implications does this have for the Imago Dei, us being image bearers of God? And how should Christians be thinking about AI, be using AI? It's ubiquitous, it's everywhere. So you're going to be using it. We need to be thoughtful on how we do that and who and what we give rights to, because that's a whole nother conversation about human rights and artificial intelligence rights and stuff. So let's start with like the two goals of AI. I think there's basically two goals from what I've been reading. One, and I did go to a Baptist church for a while, so I try to go with the alliteration. It's deep, in there, but there's mimicking the mind and mapping the mind. Mimicking the mind is let's try and produce what minds produce. Let's try and do what minds do. Who cares about the structure? Just let's look at the end product. And then there's mapping the mind, and this would be like, hey, if we can produce what human minds produce, well, then let's look at how we got there through our AI, and maybe that can tell us a little bit about our own minds.
So mimicking and mapping the mind. There's got to be a third one, though. What's the third one?
There doesn't have to be a third one. Man.
Mimicking, mapping, and
making or something. I don't
making
know.
a mind.
That's mimicking. That's mimicking.
More mortifying. Now we'll come back to it.
Yeah.
There has to be a third one though. Okay, so the two goals of AI: mimicking, mapping the mind.
Yeah.
What like are both of these good? Are these fine things for us to be doing? And what's even involved in
well, so something to think about when it comes to mapping the mind. Even that language, there's an assumption that your brain is your mind. That in mapping your brain, you'll be, you're able to see your thoughts. There's this new program coming out. There's this new movement, not program. You got to be careful with what you say here. There's a new area of study that's saying you can read people's thoughts off their brain. You can do a brain scan and see what they're thinking about. And
I've seen that.
I'm very skeptical of this because I don't think your thoughts are physical things at all. So I'm like, I don't think so. But we'll see.
They've done that though. They've actually
where'd you read it? Did you read it from a journalist, right? Like the journalists are so untrustworthy when it comes to how they promote this stuff, how they talk about it. And sometimes the theorists and the scientists let them do it because it's really good for their research grants.
Yeah, it gives them
other times they're like, dude, what are you doing? No, we didn't say that at all. Don't do that. So I've just learned like you just really cannot trust tech journalists at all. You can read like maybe five or six things and you'll start to see some truth, but there's so much like an AI wants to take over the world and here's why. And they just ask the Bing like chatbot, like, hey, can you say take over the world? It's like, gee whiz.
Okay, but what was the thing you just said? In terms of the reading the thoughts thing, I mean, I've read a little bit about it, and I think what they do is they give a person a prompt. They say, think about a tree and a cat, and it's a sunny day. And they'll do that, and then AI will, no. You know what it is? They'll have the person look at a picture of a tree, a cat, and on a sunny day, And as the person is focusing on the picture, the AI is reading what they're thinking, and it'll try to reduplicate the picture. And it actually does a very good job from what I've seen.
Yeah. So that, I mean, that's looking at a correlation, and that's an estimated guess, which AI can do really well, but it's not reading a thought, because what is a thought? It's an event, right? Like a thought isn't like a physical thing in your brain. You can't even point to the, even if you look at like the synapses and stuff, you're like, where is the thought? Is it once those neurotransmitters passed that one synapse, is that the thought, or is it this whole chain of event? Is it a vague area of the brain that's being lit up at this moment? What do you mean? Like, what is this thought that you're talking about? So,
Interesting.
but this has to do with, philosophy of mind and like being careful with our words. And a lot of folks are just like, who cares? Just, let's just say it and we'll see what happens.
Well, is there a difference between, if I'm looking at here, I'm holding up a little pinwheel. I'm looking at this pinwheel, and as I look at it, surely there's an image in my mind of this pinwheel, and because my eyes are receiving the photons and the light waves that are bouncing off of this pinwheel, and it's going into my mind is forming a picture, I'm focusing on it. Is that a thought that I'm having then? And or is the thought pinwheel?
I think it's a percept that you're having. It's perception.
Okay.
And I think perception is going to be less constructive than a thought, right? Like, and it depends. It depends on your philosophy of mind. It depends on your philosophy of science. It depends on whether you think that we're directly aware of our environments or not, or whether they're mediated, right?
Yeah.
And there's
Can you
indirect.
flesh that out?
Yeah, so I'm looking at a pen. Am I looking at this pen, or am I looking at the reflections of light bouncing off the surface of the plastic pen? And then what do I believe about surfaces? Are surfaces real things? Because if you zoom in on this, you're not going to find a surface, right?
Right.
So is that even a real thing that I'm perceiving?
Right.
It's like, I don't know, dude. This gets kind of tricky. Like looking up at the sky and I see blue, but there's no blue actually there. And so some people say, well, then technically you're not really seeing anything blue.
It's because we're looking for der Ding an sich, the thing in and of itself, which, by the way, do you remember years ago you told me that you came up with a song for
Don't
that?
do that. Yeah, that's fine. Let's just leave some things. Some things are sacred.
There's a phrase. It was Kant, right? Immanuel Kant.
I don't know if he made it up, but he talks about it a lot. I think it was already in the literature. Yeah.
The idea that we have no access to the thing in and of itself, which he was a good Prussian, so he spoke German, and he said der Ding an sich, which is the thing in and of itself, or the thing as such.
Yeah.
And so dude, I think about this stuff all the time. Like, and it's so hard. I'm sure you have a much better vocabulary to articulate this, but here's what I think about. So much of what we construe as reality, what we just think about as the world around us, is, and this goes for physical objects as well as intangible things like customs and mores.
Yeah.
It's all happening in our minds, and it's happening between our minds as well. So but we accept that the sky is blue. And so in a real sense, the sky is blue. Partially, and I'm okay saying that because partially, fully, I believe that we are created. The world is created to be intelligible to us. It's created by God, the same God that made the cosmos, the world around us, also created our minds. And so the world in some way is created for us. The sky is created for us. Like, God knew that we would see it as blue. Now, maybe God, quote unquote, sees it as not only blue, but also he sees all the individual photons, and he sees it in a completely different way we do. But he also has the perspective of seeing it as blue, or at least he knows that we do. So in a very real sense, the sky is blue. Even if you can't reduce it to its blueness, that blueness is happening in my mind, and that's part of God's design anyway. So are we good to just say what happens in my mind, that's in some way, as long as that's part of God's design and it's not like a delusion, that is reality? What do you think?
Well, so philosophers make a distinction between the scientific image and the manifest image. And the manifest image is the one you're talking about, where it's the world of persons, where we have lamps and chairs and tables. And then there's the scientific image, which is like the third person perspective, which is like, hey, actually, there's really no such thing as solid objects, because if you zoom in more and more and more, it's just like maybe an electron wave. Maybe it's all one electron wave. Like, what the heck is that about?
Yeah.
So there's the manifest image. Another good German phrase is the Lebenswelt, the life world. That's Husserl, and he's a phenomenologist, or like the father of phenomenology. And I think you're right, because I think if you have teleology, then this world has been made to be viewed from a particular perspective, from our perspective. But like God also designed ducks to see the world differently, and they see electromagnetism, and that's how they find their way back to their migration spots, because they see in a different way than we do.
Is that right?
Yeah, and so there's all sorts of different aspects to the world that we don't see, but we don't see the spiritual realm, right? Like, but I think angels can. So yeah, it's made for us for this particular perspective. But yeah, the problem is if you think you can have this view from nowhere, that's like God's view. You're like, we don't actually see the world the way it is, and you're like, what do you mean the way it is? Like, according to who? At what perspective? Why do you always think that it's like a human perspective not located by a human? Like, why isn't the right perspective to be seen? Why isn't it 35 feet up? Like from a giant's perspective or whatever. Like we're always like from roughly 6 foot, but like over there in the field. It's like, no. Why isn't it just looking straight down at a blade of grass, or up from ant's perspective? Like, yeah, it's wild, man. So I think you're right with the manifest image. I think there's a human perspective that we've been designed to see, and we can say the sky is blue, even while acknowledging the scientific image and saying, but if we were looking not from our perspective, it would look like this, or it might not look like anything, or we're appeared to bluely, like you can say that kind of stuff, but we also have been made to function in this environment a certain way.
Yeah, that's the thing. I do think maybe this is like a post-enlightenment kind of way of thinking, where we want to reduce everything down, and we also want objectivity. We want to know the essence of something, and we want to be able to view and experience that essence objectively. But that really, first of all, good luck defining a purely objective viewpoint. I think that's kind of what you're getting at, like the view from nowhere.
Yeah.
Just what the thing actually is. But we live in a world of 3 dimensions at least. So it's to have an objective view of even a sphere. You can't have an objective view of that sphere because you'd have to view it from all sides at once to be able to fully take in that objective viewpoint.
Well, including from the inside, right? So it's
that's
like
true. Yeah.
Maybe I can imagine like fusing together an image of 4 cameras around, but also from the inside out, but not just from the middle.
Yeah.
From over here out, from over here up and down and sideways. So something that this philosopher Thomas Nagel talks about in his book, The View from Nowhere, he talks about this. He says reality is more than objective reality. And it blew my mind when I first heard that. He's like, there's all these subjective experiences of all the billions of humans on Earth, but then also all those chickens, if they're conscious, and dogs. And there's all these subjective perspectives. So reality includes more than just objective perspectives, but also subjective perspectives. So it's like this crazy thing with a bunch of these little perspectives that you and I can never get to, ever.
That has always frustrated me. Did I ever tell you about this? Like when I was when I was a kid, I remember being with Dad in Aldi. I specifically remember this. We had just bagged up our stuff, at the little counter there at the end of Aldi. We're bagging things up. We're getting ready to walk through the door. And I remember thinking, and I was probably 4. I remember thinking, I will always be locked inside. I didn't know the word perspective, but inside these eyes, I will only ever be able to look out from these eyes. I will never know what it's like to be Dad.
Yeah.
Even though I think if there's one person on earth that you and I both kind of know the most of what it's like to be, it's probably Dad. But I will never fully know what it's like to be inside his head, to see. And that I used to always think like, well, maybe someday I'll be able to see from someone else's perspective. I'll be able to, and it's the most frustrating thing. I think the closest thing I've ever been able to get to that would be like marriage. Elisa and I are so linked, but then also having kids myself too. Like I kind of know what it's like now to be 11. I kind of know what it's like to be 8, but I also don't know what it's like to be my son.
Exactly.
As an 11-year-old. I don't know what it's like to actually be Elisa. Like, there's so many differences between me and Elisa. Like, even though we're so close, we share a lot of the same experiences. So often we'll both look at the exact same thing and come to both totally different conclusions. It's like, how are you not seeing
and even though you're using the same words too, there could be something else going on. Like, she could be seeing red as purple.
Well, that would probably be me that's seeing red.
But no, I mean, you're colorblind. But even your colorblind could be systematically inverted. You know what I mean?
Yeah, maybe.
There's no way to know. There's absolutely no way to know.
You love that. You love that.
It's fantastic. It's amazing. Like, holy cow! But it also just
What if your red is not my red?
It's so good, man. It's actually an argument against physicalism, views of the mind, because if that's true, if that's possible, if it's even possible, then we are not reducible to our brain states.
What is physicalism, quickly?
Yeah, just the view that there's nothing immaterial about you. And good luck defining material and physical, because it's all super duper tricky. But it's a really bold claim to be like, hey, you're a physical meat bag, right? It's like, well, define physical for me, because the physicists don't know what it means.
That's more and more, man. And we're not going to get into this, I'm sure, but just the whole idea of materialism and atheism, it's like, I want to be charitable and I want to be respectful, but this idea that what the universe is made of, well, it's matter and energy. Okay, do you understand space-time? Do you understand the relationship between the 3 dimensions of space and however many other spatial dimensions there are, and their relationship with time, and how when you move through one, you're also moving through the other? And do you even understand the interplay of what's going on at the subatomic level, and how matter and energy are like 2 words for the same thing that just manifest different?
Well, even if that stuff's even true, because there's some people who are like, hey, Einstein was wrong, and we don't live in a 4-dimensional, and so it's like, holy cow, man. So all that assumption would be, all of that process would be assuming that Einstein's right, but it's contentious. Like, so let's say Einstein's not right, then your whole theory on that is all gone. Let's get into AI though, because some people might be excited about that.
Do it.
So I'm sure someone can trace it back to Plato, because people love doing that and saying Plato really said this, and then taking some obscure phrase that he said and saying, see, look. Or maybe I'll go back to like Jewish tradition and say, this is just the golem, right? The rabbi made a monster out of clay and it came back and got them, and that's okay, fine, whatever. But I want to trace
about that.
Yeah. Frankenstein's monster is another one. It comes up a lot. But that has more to do with our fear of AI, and especially in the West, we have this fear of AI, which I'm told in China and in Asia, they don't have as much of a fear. They think AI is gonna be their friend. But over here, we make a lot of movies about Terminators and stuff, and so we're much more like, ooh, this is gonna kill us all.
Are you saying that that's wrong? That the Eastern mentality is somehow better?
No, it's just fascinating that they don't think that way, right? They're like, we're going to team up with this thing and kill the kaiju when it comes through the portal in the ocean. It's like, and we're like, no, that is the kaiju. That thing,
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's good, right?
We're going to make Mecha Godzilla. It's going to be great, because when real Godzilla comes, we can only hope, though, that Mecha Godzilla doesn't turn on us.
Right. So I want to trace it back to Leibniz's mill argument. And he's got this argument for why the mind can't be a physical thing, why it can't be a brain. And he talks about like, hey, imagine a huge mill or imagine a big thinking machine that was like the size of a mill.
When was Leibniz around?
Well, so he wrote this one in the Monadology in 1714. So
way
1700s.
before. This is all conceptual and hypothetical at that point.
That's why I want to attribute it to him, because it's like, oh, this was like before the Industrial Revolution and stuff, but close enough where his ideas can refer to actual machines that are coming down the pipe.
Oh yeah,
which is really cool, because there's mills and stuff. So he's talking about a big thinking machine that is the size of a mill, and you go into the mill and you're looking around, and all you see is gears and cogs moving, but you don't see a thought, you don't see a subject. And so he brings this argument against who was it, Hobbes, because I think Hobbes was a physicalist, and he's like, look, just imagine shrinking yourself down into the size where you can go into someone's brain. Are you going to see thoughts? Are you going to see mental events? Are you going to see pictures? No. So he used that to say that you're a unified subject, and
psychosomatic.
No. You're a unified subject. You're not a distributed process of reasoning.
Oh,
you're not just the cogs in your brain.
Okay. Is that just another way of saying you are a spirit? You are a soul that inhabits the body?
Yeah. Your mind is either part of your soul, or is your soul, or it's one word for two things. He was a little bit, closer to the medievals, and the medievals said you are a soul. Well, they had different views, but you are a soul, and your mind is a part of your soul. It's your intellect, right? So your intellect is able to reflect on the forms and stuff like that.
This is why, okay, I don't want to get too far afield here, but at some point we need to talk about whether or not an artificial object can have first person experience. And I am so vehemently against that idea, but I don't want to
let's catch us up, and we'll go right to that. Okay. So Leibniz, 1714, there's this lady, Ada Lovelace, in the 1840s. She's kind of, a lot of the AI folks point to her, and because Leibniz is arguing against AI, actually, like way back then. And then
what do you mean against it?
Well, he's saying, look, this thing is not a thinking thing. A big mill that's a machine isn't actually a thinker.
Right.
You have to be a monad, so then he gets into monadology, which is kind of weird. But lady Ada Lovelace, she says, she kind of foresees AI, and she says there'll be machines that can make beautiful scientific-y type music, and they may even bring us into a scientific revolution. And so that's kind of like the singularity. She's like the proto-singularity person.
What is
then
that?
The singularity is a point at which machines become more intelligent than humans, and there are like Nobel Peace Prize winning breakthroughs, like 10 a minute, and it just goes like human progress, and then like hard line straight up.
But isn't the singularity also where machines achieve self-consciousness? And they all link together?
The singularity is a suitcase term. There's certain things in AI that's suitcase terms, because you have to unpack them, and they mean a bunch of different things to everyone else. Like Ray Kurzweil is an AI guy who coined the term suitcase term, which is wild. So singularity is going to mean different things to different people, but initially, at least, it's like machines are smarter than humans, and they change the whole world. Everything is completely different before and after the singularity.
Okay.
So she kind of, Lady Ada Lovelace kind of predicted this in the 1840s, and her friend Charles Babbage tried to invent this machine, and he called it the analytic engine. And it was a bunch of like cogs and wheels and stuff like that. I don't think I know he didn't ever finish it, but I'm not sure if he even got to a point where he was happy with it. But it's basically he was building Leibniz's mill, which is funny. Yeah. So then, fast forward a bunch to Alan Turing, 1936. He shows that in principle, like every possible computation can be run on something that's Turing complete. So he's theorizing about computers. And 1948, he develops the first computer, or helps develop it. 1950 is this really famous paper, Computers, Machines, and Intelligence, and that's where he proposes the Turing test. Are you familiar with the Turing test?
Yeah, but
so for the audience,
out, what is it?
Yeah, the Turing test is, hey, how do we know if this machine is conscious, if it's intelligent, if it's at human level intelligence? So it's going to mean different things based on what you're saying or what you mean, but this was when behaviorism was really big in philosophy and psychology. So what really matters is not the mentality, but the physical actions.
Yeah.
So if you look like you're intelligent, then you're intelligent. So if you can pass Turing's imitation game, where there's a person and there's a computer, and they're both hidden from a psychologist, and the psychologist can't tell which one's the computer and which one's the human, then that computer is sufficiently conscious or sentient or intelligent. So it can deceive a expert at human communication. So that's the famous Turing test. And then 1956, there's this Dartmouth workshop. A lot of people point to this as like the initial start of AI. 1956. It was a 8-week conference where Marvin Minsky and John McCarthy and some of the big names that went on to like start their own AI labs got together, and they thought
this is before John McCarthy went on to found Grace Community Church.
That's right. McCarthy.
He changed.
He changed the robot changed his name for him.
Yeah.
They I'm tempted, but I won't do it. They got together and they thought they could solve. Yeah, you know what I'm saying. They thought they could solve AI in 8 weeks. They thought they could build a thinking machine. They're like, yeah, with the 4 or 5 of us together with a bunch of undergrads or grad students, like we can do this. And there's this funny story about one of the grad students was assigned to solve computer vision in like 3 weeks, and computer vision was like notoriously difficult. That's what when we do those captchas on online, they say, "Are you a robot?"
Yeah,
and you say no. Like that's computer vision type stuff.
Okay.
And it's taken us this long to make some headway on it. And they thought that a grad student could do it in 3 weeks, which is hilarious. The whole thing's like preposterous now, but it's really good. So they realized how hard AI is. 1960s, there's this kind of debate between like the mathematicians and logicians. This is these folks thought that we could map the mind and we could mimic the mind through using deductive syllogisms and pure logic and just like hammering it through. And now we call them go-fiers, or people who are interested in go-fi, good old-fashioned AI, because it didn't work. But it's kind of a pejorative now, where it's like, oh, this guy's all into go-fi, man. He's a go-fi guy. He still thinks that we can just use like logic in order to make AI. And on the other side of this was connectionists. These are the folks who are into like neural nets. And they're saying, hey, the mind isn't just these logical systems, but it's about probabilities. It's about neural networks in your brain. So let's make neural networks, and that's how we're going to make AI. And the GoFi folks had all the attention, and they hammered the connectionists, and they lost all their funding, and like they would just kept ruining them. They would come back and they'd make some more progress, and Marvin Minsky and some other dudes would write a really scathing article, and they'd lose all their funding again. Until like the 1980s, they made another breakthrough, and then now ChatGPT, that's connectionism. So they won.
Oh, weird.
The GoFi guys hammered them for years and years, and they looked like they were on top, and they never really made any progress. And then the neural net folks, because of all this advancement in computers, they got way faster and different chips, and they were able to just keep going with it. And now they won. They're here, and the GoFi folks are not.
And GoFi is now a derogatory pejorative.
That's right.
That's hilarious.
This is pretty wild. So then all the way, like there's a lot going on in here with computer vision and proposed self-driving cars and all sorts of stuff. But 2017 was a really, really big one where Google made this breakthrough with this paper called Attention's All You Need. And they discovered, they came up with the transformer network. And this is what ChatGPT runs on. And they said, like, you don't need all this other stuff. You don't need recursive thoughts that come back on themselves. They can just be feed forward you don't need any feedback. It's just next. You put in a prompt and it feeds off the other prompt. And it's kind of technical, but it's machine learning. It's deep learning because there's different layers on the inside, and there's different types of machine learning.
Well, no, okay. Pause there for a second, because feed forward versus feedback. What would feedback look like?
That would be like it's called recursion in the literature, and it's like the operating system can be reflexive of itself, so it thinks about its own thoughts. So it would move up to a second order, right? You can have a thought right now, and you
Mhm.
can then think about that thought. And you have a thought of
Sure.
a dog, and like we're self-conscious beings, right? So
Yeah.
the attention is all you need, folks, or like you don't need that in order to mimic the mind, right?
What
We don't need that.
that sounds like a false theory of mind. Like, why
It's a
would they
really
just
dude,
decide that you don't need that?
we are this is the American philosophy of pragmatism. Who cares, man? Just let it, make it work. Attention's all you need. Right? And then after it works really well, then people start going, "Oh, maybe it's conscious." And you're like, no. You intentionally cut off recursion.
Uh-huh.
But you think that I have recursive thoughts, right? So then it can never be like me because it doesn't have recursive thoughts. And you said all attention's all you need. So what's
Mm,
funny is you get really pragmatic with it and you start mimicking the mind. You start trying to produce the same products as the mind. And then once it does that really well, you're like, hey, maybe it is a mind. You're like, no. This is narrow AI. You narrowed it down to one particular function
yeah.
that we produce, which is like
Uh-huh.
conversation or art or playing chess. And then you're like, maybe it. And then all the journalists go, oh, I think it's conscious. And you're like, no, dude, you
Well,
intentionally limited it.
that doesn't even, so even if you want to say it's creating art, like Mid Journey,
Yeah.
you say it's creating art like Mid Journey, or it's playing chess. The AI does not know that it's playing chess. That's maybe that's recursion, right?
Well,
Like,
I think that's part of it. Yeah, it doesn't. I don't
it
think it
doesn't
has a
know,
sense of self at all. I don't think it. A
right?
lot of these models don't.
It's
That's
not. It
that's
doesn't
part of the
know.
project. That's part of the project of some of the AGI folks, artificial general intelligence, and these
Like, it's
folks
not
are.
creating art. It's not creating art. It's mimicking art. But it's not like the machine is going, I shall create something that I enjoy to look at and that
Yeah,
communicates a message.
yeah.
You're feeding that prompt to it, and it's going, what does my
It's not
the
even doing that
language.
much. Yeah, it's not even. It's not even
No, but
saying
it's
what. Right.
searching. Right.
Yeah.
No, that's right. But it's
Right.
searching data banks. It's going based on these prompts. Where have these prompts shown up elsewhere,
Yeah.
and what sort of outputs have been associated with these prompts? And
Yeah.
I will mimic that, or you can't even say I will mimic that, but
Yeah.
just because we're trying to ascribe something to it, like just
Right.
go
It's
with me.
really
But
hard to even talk about. Yeah.
yeah,
Um.
but it's not doing that. It's not doing anything. That stuff is just happening.
Well, is there even an it here? So this is another question because you and I we were talking about the scientific image versus the manifest image, and some people are what you would call a mereological nihilist. They think that there's actually no such thing as tables and chairs. The only thing that exists are maybe like life forms, like anything that's caught up in a life. So maybe I exist and dogs exist, but tables and chairs don't exist. Those are artifacts. Those are fundamental particles arranged table wise.
Hmm.
And so we can look at them and describe them that way. But if you zoom in, you're not going to see anything different. It's not alive. It doesn't self-replicate. It doesn't do anything that life forms do. And so the
Yeah.
only things that exist are fundamental particles and life forms. So a lot of the naturalist type folks who would say that you can mimic the mind and map the mind because the mind is just the brain, they also think that they're also mereological nihilists. So they don't think that things actually exist, but this AI is an artifact. So you're saying that there's an it here, even though the rest of your philosophy says there's no such thing as its.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? It's really weird. It's a really odd thing to be
Is
pressing
that
on.
just a blind spot for them?
I
They just
think
haven't
so.
thought
Yeah.
about it.
And mereology is kind of a niche metaphysical
Mariology is the study
subject.
of parts.
Yeah.
The relationship
Meros.
of the relationship of parts
Parts
to
and
the whole.
wholes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so all right, so this is how we got here. Is where do we stand currently in terms of what are the issues on the table today?
Yeah. So there's all sorts of, well, here's a fun one. There's at least 3 groups thinking about AI. There are 2 groups within AI safety, and then there's the robot rights folks. Robot rights folks think, hey, we need to attribute either a new category called robot rights to these types of machines that are humanoid, maybe, or we need to extend human rights to them. And so maybe they have moral concern, or maybe they have moral rights, just you know, full stop.
Hmm.
And these folks are saying, hey, how we treat robots also shows how we shows a lot about ourselves. So we're trying to make slaves, basically. We're trying to outmode all of our responsibilities on these people. Yeah, I know. And so all the AI safety people are like, what are you talking about? These things might kill us all. Shut up.
Well, not only that, but it's like, okay, you're going to just start from the belief that we have created new morally significant entities.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're going to say, yeah, it really says a lot about, what we want, because we're already taking for granted that this is like basically a person. And doesn't that just show that you just want a slave? It's like, wait a second, wait, are you mad at me for setting my books on my table? Is my table a slave?
Yeah.
No, just because this computer can spit out answers and give the appearance, maybe it can even fool you into thinking it's conscious. It's not conscious. There's no person there.
Yeah.
So this is not in any way revelatory about how we want to treat people or even animals. It's not even at an animal level. It's not even at a plant level. Like this isn't even as morally significant as hacking your way through the jungle or something like that.
Yeah.
It's just complete.
Yeah.
It's
well,
like,
okay, but
setting
so
your
here,
books on the table.
let me try to let me try to argue for them. So they would say, look, if this thing looks like a human and says I have feelings and interacts in the exact way a human would, first you might say, well, why would it do that? Well, maybe we're making robot caregivers, and in order for it to do its job well, it has to actually mimic a human. But then if it mimics a human like sufficiently well, how do I know there's not anything going on in there? Like, you'd have to be really confident in your metaphysics to be like, there's no way at all that anything's going on in there.
Mm-hmm.
But they're saying like, hey, it's a similar argument to abortion, where you're saying there's a really good, I think it's a really good argument or analogy, where you say, hey, look, I'm in charge of dynamiting a building. So I'm going to send Steve into the building to make sure there's no humans in there. And then Steve comes back and he's like, I'm pretty sure there's nobody. And it's like, I'm not going to dynamite the building if you said you're pretty sure. You better be sure there's no one in there. So the same type of argument can be brought over. You better be sure there's no one in that AI, otherwise we need to treat them, with some kind of respect. So that actually might be an argument against creating humanoid robots, right? And it's like, we have enough people in the world to have moral consideration for. Let's not make robots that confuse us into treating them with moral dignity.
But see, I think that reveals more about us because, well, okay, you said it yourself. You have to be very confident in exactly what you're doing. You have to be confident in your metaphysics and what's real. You have to be confident in your ontology, what's idea of being. You have to be confident in your anthropology. What does it mean to be a human being? A person. But then we do naturally ascribe. We see faces in the moon. We see faces in a tree.
Even things that don't have faces. You see a Roomba and you're like, oh, my Roomba's hungry.
Oh, it's so true. Like the kids will we do have a little, it's not a Roomba, it's a Eufy, which is like a knockoff Roomba. Yeah. And the kids will say, oh, Eufy is getting into trouble again. It's like, no, it's not doing anything. It is not even a beast. It is just a machine. It's just rolling around. Yeah. And you know what else? The kids will tell me something funny that Siri said. She did this, she did that. It's like, stop it. I always have to stop and be like, it's an it. And it's not even, I mean, I guess it's an it. You can say it. Yeah. But you can't, you have to be very careful in describing these things because it's all so new. We don't really have language for, like, nothing else in our world mimics humanity in the way that AI does. Even the fact that we call it AI is revealing, but we have to come up with a new vocabulary for it because we're naturally so prone to humanize and anthropomorphize things that I could see this going off the rails as
one way or the other too. It's a really
Christian worldview.
Even if you don't abandon the Christian worldview, it's a really tricky thing because at one level you're ascribing mentality and personhood and humanity to a thing that's not, and that's demeaning to human beings.
Yes.
It's also demeaning to other animals who are obviously conscious, where you're so worried about animal or human rights or AI rights and robot rights, but you're not willing to give moral consideration to animals when you speed up and hit a turtle across the road. It's like, you know what I
People
mean?
do
It's
that.
like,
Yeah.
I know they're sickos, but these people would also be like, robot rights, So some of them would.
That's funny.
It does actually say a lot about you. But then secondly, so even if you don't abandon a Christian worldview, there's some weird considerations that you got to think through. Like, could a robot ever be conscious? You mentioned this earlier. If there's at least two views on how we get our souls. So this is a view in Christianity, in substance dualist views, or hylomorphic views.
Physical and spiritual, or
at least
immaterial and
two. At least two. That there's a psychosomatic unity that the theologians are obsessed with. That you have a body and soul, or a body and spirit. So there's at least two views. One is creationism and one is traducianism. Creationism says that God specially creates a soul into each human person in their mother's womb.
Yeah.
The other one is that God has set up either a law or a policy that he interacts, that every time the sperm meets an egg, I will, or maybe 90% of the time, because actually not every sperm that meets an egg produces a life. But I
don't know about that.
No, it's true. It's true. It's not.
Yeah,
we've talked about
that. We've talked about that before. But go ahead.
Some just don't, and they don't split, and they don't show any signs of life, and it's like, oh, it just didn't work that time, right? So that could be God saying, no, I'm not going to put a soul in here, or it could be, hey, this is a probabilistic law. It's not a one-to-one, deterministic method.
Yeah.
So traducianism and creationism.
I don't know enough about that. And I don't like the implications of it. So
of traducianism?
Of the idea that every time
there's no implications of it, because there's no implications of it, because you can't know. It's the dynamiting a building. So it's not like someone can say,
I still feel like it weakens the argument a little bit.
It doesn't. You have no idea until it splits or doesn't, right?
It weakens. Anyway, go on. As long as we're agreeing that every time that there's actual conception, there is a life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Conception.
Yeah. But that's conception of a life, right? So it's like almost circular.
I'm fine with that.
So yeah, that's fine. So if traducianism is true, which I kind of lean towards traducianism, then it looks like there's a psychophysical law or laws that associate an immaterial soul with a human body at conception.
And that is now, therefore, it's like a stream of water that is confined to a pipe. All the water is confined to that pipe. So souls only come through human beings. Human souls only come through human beings.
No. See, I think actually if there's laws, then in principle, they can be hijacked.
Well, wait a minute. Maybe I don't understand traducianism. Here's what I'm thinking. I'm viewing the question as being, does God, as you said, uniquely, specifically create a new soul every time there is conception? So, there's that flash of light when the sperm meets the egg.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that flash of light, I'm not saying you can see spirit, but there's something going on there. And so, boom, new spirit, God creates, totally unique. Or is the spirit that is there, is that in some way inherited from the mother and the father? Is there some piece of their soul or some well, I don't even have vocabulary to describe it, but there's some way that the meeting of those two souls actually procreates a new soul in the somewhat of a similar way that the sperm and the egg procreate a new physical body.
Yeah, so that would be the sperm and the egg is the physical, and then some spiritual things going on that's either correlated with or directly connected to, or that same exact event.
But how could that ever happen outside the act of procreation?
So there's some kind of law that establishes when this happens, then this happens, or when this happens, then this happens. These two go together. Okay. So if there's a law, then in principle, it's conceivable that you could hack that law.
But only if all the elements were there, right?
Yeah. So we wouldn't know it. We don't know enough about the psychophysical laws to say there's a law, but it only works with a carbon-based sperm and egg. It couldn't work with a silicon-based.
Right, but there would have to be a human spirit there, because it's not just that the physical interaction of the sperm and the egg is creating a new spirit. There's actually spiritual merging that's happening there, and the new spirit that's procreated actually shares some of its essence with its parents. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. So it would have to be historically like situated from Adam and Eve.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so
God breathed into Adam, and
there's at least
God,
one case of that not happening
where in Adam?
in Christ. In the case of Jesus,
Well, I mean,
do you know what I mean? It was
Jesus did have a human mother.
he didn't have a human father, right? And so
Yeah, that's true.
and that's part of why I think traditionism is actually preferable preferable to creationism, because if creationism is true, why is God giving us all corrupt natures or corrupt souls or inclinations towards sin? You know, why are we all born with original sin if he's the one putting it in there? But if it's traditionism, then we've inherited that from our first father Adam, and Christ did not inherit that because he didn't have a earthly father.
Yeah, that's the that's that is a good point. You're right. And in some sense, we in some sense we are credited with Adam's sin and guilt because all sinned. But in another sense too, we are ontologically connected with Adam. It's not just a legal fiction.
No, because we
We
act
come
on it,
from him.
right? Yeah, so we act. I don't know that his guilt is attributed to us. That's a like a live debate, right? But his nature, I think, we're inherited a corrupt nature which we
You
act
don't
on.
think you don't think his guilt is ascribed to us?
I don't think so. I think that the corruption, we inherit a corrupt nature from him,
Yeah,
which
but
we act on, right?
yeah, I don't know. I don't know that you can separate those two. I mean, I don't want to get too far afield here.
Yeah.
We could probably take that offline, but like I'm just thinking, in Adam all sinned, all sinned. So in some very real way, and if you want to get into like the idea of headship and federalism, Adam is our federal representative, and there has to be some attribution going on. And I'll tell you why. Because with Jesus, we're not all biologically connected to Jesus. We don't inherit a biological nature or biological spiritual nature from Jesus. We have his we have his right, we have righteousness imputed to us.
Yeah.
So there has to be some kind of imputation going on there with Adam.
Yeah, but we're always judged for our sins. Right, all have
Yes,
sinned and fall
yes,
short of glory of God,
yes,
and
that's true.
penalty
Yes,
for sin is death. So if
yeah,
you didn't sin, then why would you die?
yeah,
And
yeah.
even
Okay,
think of the new covenant, man. The father's teeth are set on edge. The fathers eat sour grapes, and the children's teeth are set on edge. Don't
no
say that
longer will they
anymore.
quote that proverb. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, you're right. You're right. Uh, okay, that's probably getting a little too far out of this debate, but or this
So
discussion.
so going to AI and all this to say, I don't think that machines will be conscious. You want me to keep talking?
Yeah, like a good little AI bot.
Yeah, that's
I'll
good.
be right back.
That's good. I don't know. Okay, so Joel left. Now it's my show. I get to say whatever I want here. Okay, he's not going to know any of this, and I think we're still alive, so that's just the worst. I'll go back to the AI safety versus robots' rights stuff. So in AI safety, there are two different groups. One is like, hey, don't let AI kill everyone. Don't let them destroy the world. The other are they're focused on alignment. Hey, don't let the AI say mean stuff. And these are kind of more social justice-y folks, or maybe even like control freak folks who want to take control of the AI and not let them say things that go against their political party or their point of view. And actually, they don't like each other. The X risk, the AI risk, the AI like original safety folks, they don't want to be co-opted by the alignment folks. So there's even different language they'll use. Some will use control problem, some will use alignment problem. And I think they're actually two different things. You want the AI to be aligned with us. You want to have control over them. But even using that different terminology, like some people are uncomfortable with saying control because they think that these AIs are going to be conscious. And if they're conscious, you don't want to control a conscious agent because that's like slavery, right? So that's weird. So don't say control, say aligned. But other people say, well, aligned is just a euphemism, a nice way of saying control because we're making it and we want to keep it aligned with us. We don't want to give it freedom to rebel against us. Like, that sounds like you're controlling them. So there's just a lot of debates with a lot of people have different intuitions about AI, what it's going to be, what it is currently, how we ought to treat it, whether or not treating it will malform us individually, or whether or not there's something like actually going on in the AI, that there's a conscious perspective and that we ought to treat them as if they were a human or if they were a person. I'm going over AI safety versus robot rights.
Oh yeah. They're both crap.
I don't know, man. AI safety stuff like the X risk and okay, yeah, the AI risk folks. That's good. Yeah, this side chat is wild.
Robot rights. Some people are obsessed with ascribing rights to everything. There's always the same people that deny it to unborn children, by the way.
So they don't make I think there's a really helpful distinction. If they would talk about moral rights and moral concern, then that's cool. I love nature, bro. Like, I'm all about moral concern. You know what I mean?
You love turtles.
Yeah, dude, there are 3 turtle species in Illinois that are endangered, and I'm working to help breed them. I have moral concern for them. I think that their environments ought to be considered, but they don't have I'm not going to try and give them human rights because that's like actually wicked. You're diminishing human beings when you do that.
You know why we do that as human beings? It's Romans 1. When you don't acknowledge God.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Is it too biblical for you?
No, I just don't think
when you deny,
I think some people God, some people are really confused, right? And that's because we're not living in relation with God. But I'm not sure that it's always like I think sometimes it's culpable ignorance, right? You should have known better. You ought to have known. I don't know if they're like, take this, God. I'm going to give rights to, you know what I mean?
Dude, you know that's not how truth suppression works. You suppress the truth at a deep internal level that's so deep that it actually affects all your other faculties and all your other decisions. And so you've rejected God at such a fundamental level that you end up tacitly hating his image bearers.
Yeah.
And but the ping pong balls won't stay under the water. They end up popping up, and you have to ascribe glory somewhere, and you have to express your moral sensibilities somewhere. And you've ruled out God, and de facto you've ruled out his image bearers. Yeah. So you elevate.
But there's a way to talk about
robots, images.
I think there are various ways to talk about it that represent what's going on more or less accurately. And one of them is like, you're still an image bearer living in God's world. And so caring for animals is actually part of the original call of human beings.
Mm-hmm. But not elevating them as image bearers.
Exactly, right. So because you don't have God in your worldview, you get twisted and you take what was initially a really good thing and you're like, we need to kill all humans in order for the environment to flourish. And you're like, well, go look at a forest without a forester. They don't flourish, actually.
Okay. But what I'm saying is that is literally Romans 1 in action. I'm not saying they're doing it self-consciously. What I'm saying is there's only 2 sides in this world. There's only the kingdom of light, which is ruled by Christ, and then there's the kingdom of darkness, which is ruled by Satan. And if you will not serve Christ, how did Satan rebel against God?
Of course, I'm with you, but I'm saying like
Adam and Eve I'm saying to degrade the image bearers.
You could like skip to the point and be like, that's you are caring for turtles because you hate God. And you're like,
I didn't say that.
what? Like,
I
no,
didn't say
show
that.
your work. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, yeah, but I didn't say that. I was going to Romans 1 and I was explaining it theologically. That doesn't mean I'm going to the robot rights people going, "Well, you know why you're doing
yeah,
this,
yeah,
don't
yeah,
you?"
yeah.
I'm not doing that.
So,
You just have such a reaction against fundamentalism that you can't you start to sense fundamentalism.
it's
You're like,
because
"Oh,
you know this too. We were at a bar one time. This is like prototypical.
a bar?
Uh,
What
yeah,
do you mean? I wouldn't
yeah. We were at
don't you
this
mean
bar, and
we were in a
you and I were
library?"
like tag teaming these two different dudes. Like you were arguing with one, and then we'd switch off, and then some random like drunk dude who like had some weird fundy beliefs would jump in and ruin our whole argument because he'd be like, yeah, and another thing, let me tell you about this. And it was like, dude, you are not helping, go away.
Right.
So that's what I react against, of like that, and like these things are really complex, and I want to acknowledge that. Sometimes people will say, isn't that just this? And they go, hey, look, there's nothing new under the sun. And you're like, well, that's from Ecclesiastes. Or do you even know if that's like from a reliable narrator, or was that Solomon at the end of his life, or was that Solomon quoting someone else? Like that book is like, it might be like Job's friends, and you might be quoting from Job's friends as if it's the book of Proverbs.
In other words, to unpack what you're saying as if it's some sort of suitcase phrase, um, uh, for someone to just quote Ecclesiastes and say, "Well, there's nothing new under the sun," and if they haven't done
Yeah.
the interpretive work to actually understand, like, and to really be confident, like this is like God wants you to believe there's nothing new under the sun. Those are the words of God expressing the way things are, as opposed to Solomon or whoever the author is giving you sort of a worldly perspective that he then refutes, which is another interpretation of Ecclesiastes,
Yeah.
and one that I'm starting to actually lean towards myself. So
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, I get what you're saying.
So that's why I get triggered by that. But
I know, I know.
so
Okay,
what I like to do is I like to acknowledge, like, hey, look, that is part of the Imago Dei still on you, man. That's still, it's just twisted up. You're trying to prioritize the environment over against human beings. The AI robot rights one is like a little bit weirder, because you're like, we don't have to make AI. We do have to like think about how to care for turtles and dogs and stuff. They're already here,
we
but
were given those, yeah.
you don't have to make a robot that looks like a person. Like,
Or
what are you
even a
doing?
robot that doesn't look like a person. I mean, a robot could be completely embedded in a computer and not have any anthropomorphic characteristics. It could just like
Yeah.
Siri, it's just in your phone.
Yeah.
But
So
yeah, it's very weird. And that's
there's
why
a
I say that it's spiritual to a certain extent, even if
there
they don't acknowledge it.
even if okay, so even there's another view in the robots rights world that's more about human. It's more human centric, and says how we treat these things will shape us or habituate us in a certain way.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm more open to that, because yeah, man, okay, Westworld is a pretty depraved show or whatever, but it's fascinating.
Never seen it. I don't watch it.
There's a lot of nudity. So I'm not like commending people to go watch it, but
I'm commending people not to go watch it, but go on.
yeah. So the whole premise of like the first season is that there's this billionaire guy. He goes there and he just rapes and pillages and shoots up all these animatronic robots that look like humans.
Mhm.
And then he goes back to his civilized life. But it spills over. He's still a monster. You know what I mean? He's been cultivating this depravity. It's just a robot. Who cares?
Yeah,
I get to do
yeah.
whatever I want. And it's like, no.
Yeah.
You don't get to go around. We don't give the serial killers animatronic robots in order for them to just get all their depraved lust out on. No, that's actually not good for humanity or
You know what that
that
is?
person.
That's Grand Theft Auto. It's and it's the old argument going back to the 90s that violent video games make people violent. And or they foster something in you. I mean, that was the big debate. I don't know if you remember this, but around the time of the Columbine shooting in the 90s,
Yeah.
there was a big debate about violent media and specifically video games. And this was during the day when video games, the graphics were
It was like Doom
nothing to
or
write home.
Quake or one of the. But
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
the shooters
Wolfenstein
even mentioned, they
3D.
said, this is just like that, and like
Yeah,
that,
and
that
so
might be an empirical fact that do they do this or not? Okay.
but the question is,
Ought we be treating the image of a person in this manner? Do you know what I mean?
yeah, well, no, and that's it. And this is why I actually really loathe like horror movies and we've talked about this before.
Yeah.
And there are some Christians and pastors who just love horror because it displays evil as truly evil. And I'm thinking, man, there's enough actual evil in the world. I don't need to see people being tortured and tormented. That is, yes, I understand that it's fake. I get that, but it's the image of God. It's an image of the image of God being desecrated.
Yeah.
That's just gross to me. And look, when I was
Yeah.
in college, I used to play Grand Theft Auto, and I thought it was hilarious. But actually, I think I've since gone back and expressly repented of that because it's not healthy. It's really not. And it doesn't mean that I went around campus and did all those things, but it doesn't do good things for your mind
Yeah.
to be rehearsing that sort of thing. Even if you cognitively, factually know that those aren't actual persons.
Well,
So I get that. I get the moral concern.
there's like a whole pragmatic, and this is our thing as Americans. It's like our great contribution to philosophy is pragmatism, which is
Sadly.
sad, but that's how
Mhm.
we are. So there's even folks now are like, we're going to be, bent out of shape because they love video games. Like, it's not going to make me a killer. Okay, I didn't say that. I never said it's going to make you a killer. I'm talking about the moral fact. Is it right to depict human beings in this manner?
Right.
I don't think it is. So
Right.
now we have to have a debate about the objective fact of the matter. I'm not talking about the empirical fact of like, will this make serial killers or not? No, it's just like, is it right to do that? I don't think it is.
Yeah.
But so that's the same thing with like the animatronic robots. Like, no, if this kid has really sadistic proclivities, you don't feed that by giving him. I'm not saying
Right.
it's going to make him that way. If you already have that, no, you wouldn't give him a robot to do that with. So the same
Right.
thing goes with like sex dolls and stuff. Like, no, stop.
Mhm.
What-
Yeah.
Stop.
No, the proper way to deal with sin is through sanctification and
Mm,
mortification of sin.
yeah.
And this is why, dude, all of this is spiritual. And just because it's unacknowledged spirituality doesn't mean that it's not spiritual. We are moral beings. We are spiritual. And God is, this goes back to the very first thing we were talking about. Is the sky blue? Well, in one sense, no, but in another very real sense, yes, it is. And the reason why is because this world is created with us as an audience in mind. We're supposed to, this goes back to Romans 1 as well, but we're supposed to take in God's general revelation and we're supposed to channel that upwards into gratitude to God and glorifying his name, ascribe to the Lord the glory due his name. Remember those big banners we had in church growing up at Wheaton Free Church? There were
Yeah.
those big banners in the sanctuary. I still remember, ascribe unto the Lord the glory due his name. That is what all of life is supposed to be about. And so if we recognize that fact, and we ourselves are not computation bots, we're supposed to interact with humanoids in a certain way. We're supposed to interact with people in a certain way. And even if you say a robot is not a person, which it's not, and I'll stand by that, I'll take that to my grave. There's no first person experience for a robot. But you uh don't practice your sin on something that looks and feels like a human, because you're created to interact with that sort of
Yeah.
thing in a certain way, and you're
There's
actually
there's
training your spirit.
and there's two. So you may be training it poorly. I know some people be like, no, look, there's studies on video games and they don't. Okay. Oh, so there's the practical and empirical fact that you need to do research on, and then there's like the normative fact, moral fact of like, you ought not treat the image of God in this way.
Right.
And so that one doesn't get escaped. You don't escape out of that one just because you have an empirical data that says it won't turn me into a psychopath. It doesn't matter. This has nothing to do with the pragmatics of it. This is like a moral fact. You don't treat image bearers that way, or you don't treat persons.
Right.
Because the same thing, persons is a deeper category than human person. right? So angels, I think, are persons,
Mhm.
and Sodom and Gomorrah were trying to treat angelic persons in a detestable way, and
Mhm.
that was wicked as well. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So
Yeah.
it's not just limited to the realm of human beings. And God's a
Correct.
person, right? And
God
we have,
is God is
yeah,
tripersonal.
yeah. And I think that extends to, like, if there were aliens, right? Like, if they're aliens and they're persons,
If
then
they're
they have,
persons, yeah.
for sure. Even if they're not persons, I think we ought to have moral concern for them as creation, right?
Yeah. Well, we
If
would
they're
have
trying to like wage war on us, then that's a little different story. Then we're gonna go ham on them. But
then we turn into what's his name, who in Independence Day flew his jet right up in the right up in the middle of the,
that's right.
you
That's
know.
so good. Yeah.
Okay, so listen, man, we have some questions that people have. Um, we have some questions that people have asked, but um, have you fully expressed all that?
No, wait. We haven't even scratched the surface. There's so much to talk about.
This is all you
Um,
know. We've now
I'm
exhausted
just
your
pretend.
knowledge.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But that's good. I mean, I'm just the. I guess the main goal is like, hey, we need to be thinking about this as Christians, but also that it's really fruitful because it helps us think about what does it mean to be a person, what does it mean to be human. It brings theology in. Why, how do we think our souls come about? Right? We talked about some of this: traditionism, creationism. What is
We need to
intelligence?
settle that. We need to settle. Can no? Here's what we need to settle. Can a machine ever be self-conscious and be a person? Yes or no?
Um, can we build one? I don't think so because I have a mind first ontology. I think that your mind is part of your soul. I think that's actually what does the informing of your body. I think there's
Mhm.
some weird stuff that happens in the womb that is explicable if you have a soul that is actually doing the informing. That doesn't make sense if it's not, right? So I think that the mind's actually doing some work there. But
Yeah.
if a different view of mind, if emergentism is true and your mind emerges out of your body, then I think in principle you could make a robot that is conscious. If consciousness is more like a magnetic field than it is like a substance that's there from the beginning,
Mhm.
then yeah, I think we could, at least in principle, produce an artificial mind. Would God allow that? That's a different question. Is that immoral? Yeah, probably. You know what I mean? Like
Oh yeah, totally,
there's different stuff about. Well, I don't know. There's no
totally.
prohibition against doing that.
Uh, okay. If you, well,
So if you're Catholic, then you're going to think like totally because there's only one way, and even using prophylactics and stuff is like sinful, right? But they
yeah,
have a different view. They think that sperm are like alive, and it's if it gets turned over, in your loins, that's okay because that's a natural process. But if you were to spill that on the ground, you've like committed a moral atrocity. And it's like, yo, I don't think so,
yeah,
man. But
no, no. That's just, I mean, it comes from, quite frankly, not great exegesis of, was it Onan who did that in
I'm
the
not sure
Bible?
if it
But
is on it or not. Yeah.
okay, but here's the if you go back to Genesis 1 and 2 and you see how did God create man? He first formed him out of the clay, out of the ground, and then he breathed life into him. And so that's your origin of consciousness. The man became a living being at that point. Prior to that,
Dogs are conscious, man, and God didn't do that with dogs.
that well, okay. Stick with me here because
Yeah.
in Genesis 1 and 2, um, God forms all the animals, but man does not become a living being until God breathes into him. So, whatever it means for a man to be a living being as man, qua human, that comes from God breathing into him. And
So then maybe you couldn't make an
so,
artificial human person, but maybe you could make a conscious machine that's conscious at the level of a dog or a monkey or a blue whale.
that's interesting.
So there's a dilemma here. Some people think that only humans have souls. If you think that, then you think that dogs are either robots or they are conscious without an immaterial soul. So if you think that, then you think that
Humans are, well, to quote C.S. Lewis, humans are souls.
Well, then so are dogs.
Dogs are nefesh. Which is the Hebrew word meaning essentially soul, roughly.
Yeah,
So
I think the Old Testament uses like ruach for God breathing into our nostrils, but I think I think that it does mention animals having ruach.
dogs are, I believe dogs are nefesh. Nefesh haya, I think is the living soul. I believe that's what it means. And maybe that's just applied to human beings. I'm not totally sure. But
Well,
I mean,
so
yes, animals, but there's a qualitative difference, and
that's fine though. But that's fine. That's what I'm saying. So you could
even
still
if
have
you
a
look at the
conscious
creation account.
machine. So maybe you couldn't make a human person because let's say a certain form of traditionism is true and they're not connected sufficiently to the history of humanity through a sperm and an egg.
Yeah.
But animals were brought forth in a different way and they weren't specially breathed into. Some people say that they were, right?
But they were, but again though, they were brought forth in a certain way. They weren't plants, and they weren't rocks. There's a first person experience of what it's like to be
So
an
I think
ant.
that's true too. If someone listening thinks that animals don't have souls but they're conscious, then that person has to explain why a machine can't be conscious, right?
Right. No, and yeah, so I would not go into that category. I just really want to stress the qualitative difference between humanity and everything else, even between
But
humanity and angels,
so there's
humanities and
consciousness
animals.
on both sides, right? There's consciousness on both sides of that
In a
chasm.
yes,
So
yes, that's correct.
so
In a
you could have
certain
a
sense,
qualitative
there's
difference of human beings. That's fine. Leave that off. That's over here. And then the rest
mhm.
of creation, wherein there are conscious beings that are not humans, that are qualitatively different. On this side of the thing, you could have machine consciousness.
I would say this. I would say that I can support animal consciousness in some way from scripture. And I could do that from is it Numbers where Balaam's donkey talks to him? Balaam's donkey has the ability to speak and to describe what has been happening to him. Now, I don't know what changed qualitatively in Balaam's donkey's mind at that moment or subsequent to that moment, but if you read the account, the donkey is describing to Balaam, look, you beat me, and not only that, but the donkey remembers what's happened in the past. The donkey, she says,
That doesn't
I've
mean we can. I mean,
I've
it's hard
never
to
done this
let.
to you. Well, but what I'm saying is there's something, there's at least a capability on the part of an animal to do that. Now, I don't know if do animals have an inhibitor on themselves 90% of the time
Well,
or
okay.
what? I don't think so.
My point was you were stressing the qualitative difference and why we can never have a conscious machine because humans are special. So I said
Well,
leave off
yeah,
humans, right?
yeah.
And now you
But
need an explanation for why you think machines can't be conscious.
okay, but here's my I do have a point embedded in
Yeah,
this,
yeah,
and that is that animals they're not purely objects. They're subjects in a certain sense. They're
yeah.
not only acted upon, they do act as well, and they choose. And you and I have talked about whether or not they have beliefs. I think according to a certain definition, I think you can say that they have beliefs. So maybe I've changed on that a little bit, Park. But
Yeah.
the idea is that animals are, when it comes to subjects and objects, animals are on our side of the subject object divide, whereas a desk is not, a rock is not. A
Sure.
rock is acted upon. There's nothing that it's like to be a rock. And
Yeah.
so a
But why
computer,
couldn't yeah, keep going.
well,
Yeah.
okay, so that is a category that is received by us. It's not a category that it's not a distinction that is created by us. We're not God. We receive this world and we receive these categories. And so we don't get to move something from one category into another. We're actually not capable of doing so. We can't
Why
move.
not? That's the question is why? Why? Because we're made in God's image, we're sub creators, we create worlds with our words in an analogous way that God does, though,
Well, we could describe a scenario in which a rock comes to life, sure, with our words, but that's the
but
extent
I'm
of
why think that though? Why think that we can't create a conscious being?
why I think that we could. I think the
Well,
burden of proof is on the person who thinks that we have that kind of. Why can't we create matter out of nothing?
so the AI,
There's
the AI folks would say like, let's see, right? But a lot of Christians are like, no way. And it's like, well, one person's saying let's see, the other one's saying no way. The burden of proof is on the person saying no way. Like,
because if
why?
you well, I mean, go back to the whole mill argument. Just because you make a very, very complex
Yeah,
object, that doesn't change the fact that it's purely an object.
right.
That and that's
I think that's the line of argument to go with.
yeah.
And
Complexity. There's more to consciousness than complexity.
yeah, I think that's right. So I would say along those lines, I'm working on a paper, um, and I want to make a distinction between derived intelligence and intrinsic intelligence. And I think that an algorithm is a set of instructions,
Hmm.
and you say like that algorithm, you can say like, oh, what an intelligent system, but that's strictly speaking not accurate.
Correct.
The intelligence ought to be attributed to the conscious being who set that up,
Hmm.
right? And so there's a derived intelligence there, but there's not any intrinsic intelligence, because the attribution of intelligence ought to terminate on the conscious being who made the thing.
Hmm.
So I think that
Who you give the credit to? Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
But I think there might be a teleological argument in that vicinity as well, because you look at a tree or a system of trees that connect with each other through their roots in a forest, and there's intelligence there. Depending on our definition of intelligence, it looks like that's an intelligent system, and yet there's no conscious being there. And so I
Yeah.
think the attribution of intelligence that we want to ascribe to inanimate life forms like trees ought to terminate back on their creator, God. So I think
Well,
there's an analogy between looking at derived intelligence in AI and seeing also derived intelligence in non-conscious life forms like amoebas and trees.
yeah, and I understand too that at certain points it does get very complicated to try to figure out whether or not something is even alive, like a virus, for example.
Yeah.
A virus is almost like a piece of computer code. Almost, it's like a biological piece of computer code. I might be way off in describing that, but my understanding is that a virus is not the same kind of thing as an animal. It's not the same kind of thing as a plant. Sort of in its own category.
Yeah,
That
this is
that
a
being said,
live debate. Yeah.
yeah. That being said, though, again, I really, really want to stress this, and maybe it's because I've been reading a lot of Tolkien lately and about Tolkien. And Tolkien talked about how we are, oh, I don't know. He either said that we're makers, not creators, or we're
Sub
creators, not
creators. Yeah,
makers.
that's where I was getting that from earlier.
Yeah, and so the idea that Tolkien had, and I do think it's a true one, is that we can take what God has given us, but we can't subvert the categories. We cannot and we should not attempt to transcend those categories in a way that puts us in a position of being actually God. Like that
Okay.
way,
So
wait, hold on.
yeah.
That way, that is actually um it's immoral in a certain sense.
But that's
And
different.
so,
Immoral versus possibility, right? Like you ought not to and you cannot.
well, okay, look, the angels who did not keep their proper place of authority, in Genesis 6, which is recapitulated in Jude and in Second Peter, I think Second Peter 3, the angels who did not keep their place of authority, did they procreate? Yes, I do believe they did. I think they took on physical bodies, and in some way, shape, or form, they were able to procreate.
Yeah, I mean that's based on one interpretation though, right? Like that could not be true. It could be read a different way,
Yeah,
right?
I think it's the correct interpretation, though. I
Yeah.
think that's what Jude and Peter are describing. I think you have to really, really stretch the text to make it mean
Well,
something
I
else.
think so it's a contested text so I don't want to make doctrinal statements on a text that's like, I'm not sure you know
Sure,
what I mean?
but even then, what I'm saying is there might be a possibility there that would still be
Yeah.
immoral. So
Sure,
so
sure.
if you want to go with like the more like evangelical squish interpretation where they were sons of Seth and all this stuff, okay, that's fine. But that even helps my point more because
That's
then
not
not only
evangelical
is it
squish. The evangelicals are the ones who are like, it was a demon, and
No,
then
no,
they
no.
put the dinosaur
No,
bones in the ground.
those are the funnies. It was
That's true, I guess.
it was the evangeli squisher. Like, no, we have to be more reasonable about this because
Yeah.
remember, we might offend our.
No, it's not about offending.
We might offend our rationalistically minded people, and really, we should be more like them.
I want to bring up Mars because this category thing, I'm with you, but the angels, I think the angels had a clear understanding of their role, and they actively disobeyed it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what our I don't know what God wants us to do with Mars, right? So, like John MacArthur would say, it's immoral to try and have dominion over Mars. We've been given Earth, and it's like, dude, it said the Bible talks about Earth, but it doesn't make zero mention of Mars. Is it immoral for us to go to Mars and exert our dominion over the whole universe? Or are we limited to Earth? Why do you act like the Bible says only stay on Earth and that it would be immoral? This is a live question that I think there's an analogy between having dominion over Mars and trying to make AI. Do you know what I mean? We can't make anything whole cloth. We're still sub-creators. I can never create into nothing the way God did. But what's the morality of trying to make artificial life? It doesn't say don't do that. Just like it doesn't say don't conquer Mars, stay on Earth. You know what I mean? The categories aren't as clear. So we do have to do some reasoning to figure out what is our role? What is our limits?
I think we do have to do reasoning. I think you're right. And I believe me, I have gone back and forth on this myself because we want to be biblical. Not only that, but we want to be, as John Frame says, something akin to biblicists, where scripture is our epistemological foundation. It's also the foundation of our conduct. It's our ongoing norm. And so we do need to listen to scripture on these things. And if scripture's not explicit, I'm not comfortable adding in requirements where scripture is silent. I want to put that forward.
Right.
I will say, Psalm 115:16 says this, and this goes directly to what you just said about Mars. The heavens are the Lord's, but the earth he has given to the human race. So you could say from that, there could be a case made that we ought to cultivate and have dominion over Earth, over this planet, but you don't go beyond that boundary and go try to cultivate and colonize Mars. Now, Rod Martin, he's a Baptist, something of a futurist. He's very smart and really cool. I heard him speak at a conference 3 years ago. He is all about the soil. Wherever we can step, we should have dominion. We should absolutely conquer Mars. We should go to the furthest reaches of the planets. Now, I love that idea. And I remember having a conversation with Dad 30 years ago when we were talking about why did God make the universe to expand? And it was like this epiphany we both had. Oh, he made the universe expand so that we would always have more to explore because we're going to live forever. So we can go everywhere. I mean, imagine what the technology will be like in the new heavens and new earth. We'll be able to go everywhere. And, maybe that's something that, okay, so just someone might rebut that and say, well, no, that's for after the resurrection. That's for the new heavens and new earth. For
and maybe
now,
it's
you're
going to be
supposed
completely different, right? And I don't know that it could actually extend infinitely the way it's set up now. You know what I mean? Like, entropy and stuff, right? So,
right. Maybe it'll all collapse back in on itself, and who knows what'll happen in 10 trillion years. So I don't know, but there is a case to be made. Psalm 115:16, and let me push that one step further. There's another verse that says, where King David says in the Psalms, he says, I do not concern myself with things that are too lofty for me. And the secret things belong to the Lord. I think that's even a different passage. Are you familiar with these passages? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. What is that? Yeah.
Well, so here's, let me just push this a little bit more. It's not made explicit what those things are that are too lofty for me.
Yeah.
And it's not made explicit what the secret things are that belong to the Lord. Now, there have been times when people are like, well, the Trinity, how the Trinity works, that's one of those secret things. Or what was going on before the first moment of creation, that's one of those secret things. The point is that scripture doesn't make that clear, and yet David thought that was at least clear enough in his mind, he had cognitive rest, that there were some things that are secret that belong to the Lord, and he actually viewed it as virtuous to not pursue those things.
Yeah, but his son thought the opposite. His son said, Solomon said in Proverbs,
the glory of God
25, it's a glory of kings to find them out.
Yeah.
And it doesn't say, David doesn't say the secret things belong to the Lord, therefore don't go looking after them, right?
Well, he does say, I don't concern myself with things that are too lofty for me.
Too lofty for him.
He's David. I mean,
his son was smarter than him, right? Like
in certain ways.
Yeah, not morally smarter, right? Yeah. But certainly intellectually smarter. So that's what I mean. Like that's David responding about himself, but that's not a blanket statement on humanity not looking into secrets of God. Okay, so, like that's.
Yeah, he's not just being descriptive though; he's being prescriptive. I mean, Psalm 131:1 is the verse. Here's what it says in the CSB. It says, "My heart, Lord, my heart is not proud. My eyes are not haughty. I do not get involved with things too great or too wondrous for me." So he's associating. There's a certain kind of unholy curiosity that he's tying with pride and haughtiness, which Solomon, if you want to say Solomon was wiser, one of the 7 things that the Lord hates is haughty eyes. So
sure, but he also refers to himself, right? So this also has to do with self-knowledge, knowing your limits, knowing your place in the world, knowing what God's made you for. And he made Solomon to know things that David didn't know. He made me to know things David doesn't know because I know about the full revelation of Christ. You know what I mean? Like I can reason about the Trinity in ways that David never could.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, and Paul made known to us the secret that's been hidden from all, you know, like,
yeah,
dude, we know this secret that no one in the Old Testament knew about.
So does that just mean that whatever you can figure out is something that's not too lofty for you? Because if so, then David's statement is almost rendered meaningless. Like,
yeah,
what is he not concerned with?
I don't think David's statement is a normative claim at all. Like he's talking about himself there. You know, I don't.
Then why does he tie it to pride and haughtiness?
Because it would be proud for him. He's thinking that it would be proud for him to delve into things that are too lofty for him.
I'm not saying I have it all figured out. I'm just saying
I don't think that way at all because of Proverbs. I'm like, dude, God hid a bunch of secrets, and it's the glory of kings to find them out. So let's go and find out everything we can.
Listen, I'm with you. I mean, I have a degree in philosophy, as you know, and I have a degree in history. I mean, these are I love investigating things, of course. But what I'm saying is there's a case to be made that there's at least a case to be made that there are boundaries to what we can do and what we should and what we should do, and that those boundaries aren't necessarily explicitly spelled out in Scripture. This 100%. Is my point.
I'm with you on that.
Yes. Yeah. So David is alluding to something where he's not saying, and this is the boundary beyond which you shall not pass. Okay, he's not saying that, but he is, and this I think goes back to some of the subjective nature of our experience. Like is this sky blue? Well, I can look up and I can see that it's blue. So yeah, it's blue because God made me to live in this world. And part of what it means to say the sky is blue is to imply I have a subjective experience of the sky being blue. So in other words, David is talking about boundaries. David is talking about limits. And what are those limits? Well, maybe those limits aren't ontological limits, but like we should be able to look at creating a human animal hybrid and we should be able to say that's wrong. But is this spelled out in Scripture? Well, I think that the tenor of Scripture and what Scripture says about humans and animals and subjects and objects, you know that it's wrong. I have the Spirit of God in me.
I think that's I'm with you, but I think that's where maybe
I'm not trying to be radically subjective here.
No, I don't think you are. I think it's just radical biblicism is false because of what we just talked about. Like, because you have to say, is it explicit in Scripture? No, but by scriptural principles, you can definitely say making a human pig hybrid is morally wrong. You know
and you can fall back on Scripture to show that. I don't want to say we have like some like our intuition is autonomous from Scripture or anything like that. You should be able to fall back on Scripture.
But Scripture talks about that. Scripture says it's written on our hearts and stuff. So like we can use moral intuitions and be like, yeah, dude, like even my moral intuitions that aren't explicit from scripture, I can trust my moral intuitions because scripture says that I can. You know what I mean? So it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know that you can tie it all directly back in like a one-to-one. So that's just what I mean when it's like, yeah, I don't think like that type of scripturalism is accurate. If you want to
Yeah.
say like it's my bedrock foundation, of course, yeah, definitely, I'm with you. But I'm just saying, like, I don't know what any of those mysteries would be. I would think initially a mystery we shouldn't have delved into is like splitting the atom, like fission and fusion. But then also it's like the cleanest energy.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, that may be a type of knowledge that we ought not have because we can blow up this world, but also we can make clean energy that brings us all into like a great place where we're not polluting.
Yeah, but it's also not immoral. So it might be very dangerous, but it's also not immoral
But you could
to
totally make that
split the atom.
case.
It's not immoral to split the atom.
1935, you could be like, hey, look, atoms are a category of things that ought not be subverted, and in splitting them into, smaller parts, like, you know what I'm saying? You could see someone making that argument, and then us on this other side of things being like, oh no, I see why that argument's not good.
Yeah, but again, I mean, I just as someone could make that argument, that doesn't mean I would have or should have agreed with that argument. It's
That's what I'm
like
saying about AI right
yeah,
now, though.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? We're
Well,
on this side and we're like, no, that's clearly a defined category that we ought not traverse. But is it?
well,
I actually don't. So I don't
it
think
does
it's
seem to
possible to make a
be
conscious being. You know what I mean?
right,
I've already said
right,
that, right? But
right.
but if a different theory of mind's true and emergentism is true and minds emerge out of a physical substrate, then
Yeah,
it's at least possible that we could make an artificial conscious being that may not be on the same level as a human being, right? But could be
yeah,
on the same level as like a dog,
yeah.
right?
Again,
So
I don't buy into the underlying worldview. It's like, well, if that's true, well, I don't think it is. So it's like, okay, sure. What if frogs turn into princes? In that world, what would be the
but so that's
implications
such
of
a confident
stepping on a frog? Well,
that's
you
so
shouldn't do it, but
the
that's
like
not the world we live in.
metaphysics is so abstruse and like out there that it's kind of hard to be that confident
What does
in
abstruse mean?
like not grounded.
Oh
It's
yeah,
like airy fairy, it's abstract.
yeah, okay,
So it's like metaphysical theories, you could have one and hold a different one the next day
yeah,
and not a whole ton has changed. You know what I
right,
mean?
right,
So
yeah,
it's like to be that confident in my metaphysics, like, hey, panpsychism could be true. There could be like proto consciousness and everything. And when God oriented us in a certain way, that is what it means to be an image. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think
Listen,
that's
I hear you,
true,
man.
but
I
it could be.
have you ever heard the idea? This is going a little bit far afield, but have you ever heard the idea that the the physical world, when you really Frame talks about this kind of thing.
Hmm.
Physical reality, material reality is actually irreducible to anything. You can't actually you will always be able to constantly go deeper. And
Oh yeah,
what's his
yeah,
name?
for sure. It's
Wilson, ND
gunk.
Wilson.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, ND Wilson talks about how prime reality is it's the spoken word of God. That is what everything is. It's literally God's word. And so why do things have durability from one moment to the next? Because God is upholding it by his word.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, string theory, if true, only reveals one more question, which is what are the strings? And you get further and
right,
further
and you
more
get down to that
primary.
level, and you're like, "What is going on?" Like, because there's also information theory at the fundamental level is
Mhm.
information, and I think
Yeah,
if that's true, that fits really nicely with
that's pretty close to
with
just being the logos at that point.
well, right, and I think we live in an actual narrative. Like, I think that we're
Mhm.
narrative beings living in a novel. So I
Yeah,
think that makes sense really well, but also like
yeah.
you could switch that tomorrow and be like, "Well, we live in God's mind." And
Uh-huh.
we're thoughts, and you're like, is that a creator creature distinction? No, it's still, you're still distinct. I'm distinct from my thoughts. I'm
Mhm.
not my thoughts. So we could be living in God's mind, but that's a whole different system. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? But it still makes sense of the same phenomena. And it's like, dude, I don't, it's that all that to say metaphysics is weird.
Or
So
those could be perspectives on each other. Sorry, go on.
I could be wrong about my theory of mind, and there's a bunch of other theories of mind that could make sense of a robot being conscious, of us making them. And that doesn't even have to do with whether or not we ought to, because that's a whole, the
Yeah.
morality is different
Yeah,
than the
it's
possibility,
true.
right?
I mean, in my heart of hearts, the idea of a computer in any sense having any kind of first person experience. What's that called? Qualia, right?
Yeah.
That
But we don't even know how ours came about. You know, like even on a biblical worldview, even with like looking at like sperm meets egg, like, okay, then what? And all of us are like, dude, I have no idea what, like, why am I this is so weird.
But it's still, but that in and of itself, that doesn't make it easier to imagine.
No, it makes all positions crazy. You know what I mean? Every position is insane.
That's what I mean. That doesn't make it easier. Like there's an approach you could have where you go, well, we don't know how it came about. Therefore, why couldn't a computer be sentient? I don't go that way at all. I say we have no idea. The idea that a computer could become sentient is therefore that much less realistic.
No. Okay. Well,
like that doesn't make like
let me
there's
toss
no possible way.
Let me toss one. I meant to bring this up. I gotta take a leak too. So
What do you mean too? I didn't do that.
Yeah. Okay. There's this multiple realizability argument from Hillary Putnam, and he says the thing that's wrong with identity theories of mind that would identify you with your brain is that that would make like a pain state, like a C fiber firing in your brain. That's what pain is. So we have this word pain, but all that really is just a C fiber firing. But you step on your dog's paw, and he also has pain. But he doesn't have C fibers at all. There's a different mechanism in his brain that are associated with pain states, right? The neural correlates of consciousness are different in a dog than in a human being. Therefore, because pain is multiply realizable across species, that means that we're not identical to our physical brains. But that multiple realizability argument can also motivate other types of consciousness, like conscious aliens, right? So like if an alien has a different biology than us, like it seems plausible that they could still be conscious like us.
Sure.
Even if they're not carbon life forms.
Here's the thing. I don't even think you need a body to be conscious. I mean,
right.
I think
because we believe in angels, we believe in God.
Right. So if God, no. Look, sure. All this, let's take this to the nth degree.
That cracks it wide open for saying like, hey, look, other types of things can be conscious other than biological humans.
But again, I think that means that there's something ontological about consciousness where it doesn't just arise. That's this like conscious entities are on a completely different level than, even though we don't fully know what material things are. Maybe you might say we don't know what they are at all. We don't know what materiality means.
Right.
But the fact that I could imagine an alien with totally different biology that is still, like a jelly. Like what the heck is a jellyfish? A jellyfish is,
right. Or like a cloud being, like
sure,
made of gas.
I can imagine that. But now, I mean, really, you could say we're just talking about, like, what is a cherub? A cherub is a living being. Do you know that when you read the prophets, it doesn't say I saw an angel. It says I saw living beings. And then you look at the living beings that Ezekiel describes, and then you look at the living beings that John describes in Revelation, and they're really similar, but they're also really different. And it's almost like their physical forms have changed, or they're being expressed differently. And it's like, am I looking at a physical body? Is this a spiritual body? Is this some third category I don't even know about? Why do the cherubs look different? It's the same Lord, but he's now surrounded by, like, instead of four beings with different attributes, it's one being with four different attributes, four different faces. Yeah. And it's like, what changed between Ezekiel and Isaiah and John? Or is this just the Lord communicating something about his presence that's being expressed personally? Do these things even have first-person experience? But here's my point. It sure seems like there are expressions of first-person experience and self and personhood that can be expressed physically or at least visually in radically different ways. I'm totally good with that. But all that does for me is to emphasize the great mystery behind it. And it's not something that just pops up in a desk, in a computer.
But that's not
a complex material reality.
But so I don't think physical things can have thoughts or be about things. They don't have intentionality. But in a computer, there's hardware and there's software, right? And so some people would say like our mind is our software running on our brain. You could still have a conscious machine without saying that physical things can be conscious. It's the emergent property that emerged out of the machine. There's cognitive synergy going on between all the different systems that are coming together to produce something. Now there's arguments against that. There's combination problems because you and I have a first person perspective that's wholly unified. We don't have different, like we have a unified phenomenal experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so some people would say, well, that's because we're a mereological simple thing. And so no physical thing is mereological simple. So no physical thing can have a conscious experience like ours. Okay. So these are different arguments. But if that argument fails, then you know what I mean? Like we have to have a reason to say, this is why I think this is not true.
Yeah.
It's complicated. I'm with you. I don't think it's true, but it's like, it's crazy. No, it's crazy.
I get it. I totally get it. I just I call it a theological stance, but when I see the way that life emerges in Scripture, I see it being formed by God, and then God sets in place an order for the way that life emerges. And I do think when God does something, there's not only the situational descriptive element of what I'm reading, but there's also a normativity to it. God did this and not that, and that says something about the morality of what he did, because God is perfectly morally good, righteous, holy, etc. So there's a moral significance to the way God did things. And so I would say this here. I guess maybe I'll summarize my position this way, and I'm certainly open to having this changed. I don't want to be super dogmatic on this, but I would say that it would be immoral to create a conscious entity out of anything else other than the biological, spiritual means that God has given us. So like, a guy who's breeding goats, that's fine. A guy who has children, of course, that's good. But to try to make your computer conscious, I think would be immoral. I do also think it's impossible. I don't think it. And Park, here's one of the reasons I really, really, really want to stress that, because not only do I believe it, but I do see us potentially going as a society towards this idea of robot rights. The heart is desperately wicked, man. That way will lead to oppression of humanity if we start to imagine that robots have rights. And I think we need to draw a very clear line in the sand and say they don't have rights, they are not self-conscious, they are not persons, and we must not treat them as such, because that will lead to oppression and the denial of the image of God's image bearers having our actual God-given rights. It always goes that way. It will go that way, and I want to stress this now before it becomes this big moral quandary and you start getting think pieces in Christianity today about how, we need to lay aside our rights for the good of the robot alien.
But so, dude, this is all you're saying. I think that this is a theological position, but then you're saying now we need to act accordingly. You know what I'm saying? But it's like,
yeah.
But no, it's not. That's not. It's a live question based on one's ontology, whether or not these things are conscious. So you could still team up with someone who thinks that they would be conscious and say we should not make them. You think because they won't be conscious.
I could team up with them practically, sure, yeah.
Yeah,
we wouldn't agree. We wouldn't be in
right.
agreement.
But so like possible. Saying like these, I have a theological stance. Therefore, no way we should like give them rights. But you could be wrong, and they could actually be conscious things, and you're not giving rights to something that is a conscious being.
Well, that's why I also said it would be immoral to do that if it were possible.
Right. So I think that one's more like defensible. You know what I mean? Because someone with a completely different ontology could also say it's immoral.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
That's what I mean. That's the lower bar.
I'm not denying that. You could think that it's possible and still say it's immoral, and I'll join hands with you and sing Kumbaya and all that great stuff. But
but it's like a shaky foundation to say.
I don't see it as shaky. I see it as being rooted in Genesis 1 and 2.
the possibility question, the answer to whether or not it's possible was like, hey, look, I think it's not possible. You know what I mean? But it's
yeah. No,
that's what I'm saying.
I mean, whatever you want to say. Like, I'm trying to be epistemically humble here. Like,
Yeah.
I guess this is one of those things I could be wrong about. Okay, but it's also
right. But so if that's that, the level of like certainty when it comes to the moral actions taken should match the level of epistemic like credence.
Yeah, but when you combine the moral
But the moral
position,
I'm saying is way more founded, way more strong, right? But the moral one can also be taken up by someone
but
who has different ontology.
yeah, but okay, but again, when we're talking about what should be the normative course of action, the morality is obviously going to be more forceful, because just to say it's impossible, but it'd be totally moral to do it, well then great. Well then we shouldn't put any restrictions in place, because hey, it's impossible anyway. What I'm saying, if we're going to be basing our future conduct off of anything, of course it's going to be the moral reality. You don't have to restrict someone. You don't have to say, don't you flap your wings and fly to the moon. Don't you do it, because it's impossible anyway.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? But
yeah.
But you could say this. You could say, not only is it impossible to fly in that sense, but also it'd be immoral to chuck yourself off the Sears Tower.
So I thought the immoral part was, hey, look, these things aren't conscious. They can't be conscious. So therefore it'd be immoral to treat them as if they were.
Well, I think where the what I'm really concerned about, and this is the existential side of things coming through. Okay, this is the existential perspective. What I'm really afraid of is this. We will get to a point in the future where society makes it a moral imperative for us to treat our Roombas with moral dignity, and you're going to start to see people getting locked up for mistreating their robots. And that's where I get really concerned, because dude, like, right now there are people who would love to wipe out all humanity so that the animals and plants can thrive. Like, people are twisted that way. And it won't be long before someone goes, we need to kill humanity so that the robots can live in peace. Poor, innocent, helpless robots. If only humans weren't here.
Sure, there's weirdos. So if a robot were conscious, do you think that it would be deserving of any kind of rights or moral concern?
If it were conscious, there would consciousness absolutely comes with moral concern.
Okay.
Now, wait a minute. Don't assume that we would. Don't assume right away that you know what our normative relationship should be like with them. And the reason why I say that is this: there are conscious entities such as angels, and by the way, evil spirits, which we interact with differently than we do with animals. So for example, okay, let's say it's late at night, you start to get really scared, the back of your neck, the hair starts sticking up, and you have this overwhelming sense, and maybe you're being tempted to sin or something, or to fear, to really be afraid. You know how sometimes that just happens out of nowhere, right? And you get this sense, there's a demon in this house with me, okay? You don't have a moral obligation to respect that demon's rights. You call on the Lord Jesus, you say, in the name of Jesus, get out. You see what I'm saying? So you're acting very differently than you would
but you
your
still
dog.
Yeah, sure. And you actually have some moral obligation to not listen to them.
Yeah.
Right. So you do have
to not respect its wishes or whatever.
But you still have you have a relationship with this other being.
Right. But what I'm saying is we don't relate to all conscious beings the same way.
But you still relate to them.
In some sense, yes. In some way, yes.
So if the AI, if the robots in the future are conscious, then we have some sort of relationship to them that would be different than if they were just robots.
Of course.
That had nothing going on. So that would be a live question to say, is this thing conscious or not? But you know what I mean? Like, but I have a theory that precludes them being conscious. Right. Was your theory right or not? Because all these other theories also explain the same phenomena, but they predict that it is conscious. Yeah. So now you have to say why yours is true and theirs is not true.
For sure. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Yes. Yes, you have to be able to defend your position. And look, you have to be able to defend your moral position as well. I mean, so maybe the most ethical thing to do if AI becomes conscious, maybe the most ethical thing to do is to destroy them all. Maybe. I'm not saying I presume. I'm not saying I presume to know what the ethical way to treat a conscious AI is.
And well, so all this goes into like reasoning about it and saying like, hey, look at the complex factors that are here. Let's probably not do that. Let's probably not seek to try and make them conscious. So some people will say it's not possible at all. Therefore, what a waste of time. Haha, look at them. Yeah. When I'm saying like, hey, look, man, our ontologies aren't as sure. We're not as sure-footed in our ontology as maybe you presume, as people presume. So maybe we should be a little bit more concerned about people doing this instead of just going, haha, I know everything about ontology. Therefore, this is never going to happen. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, for sure. That's
I'm not saying that's you. I'm like trying to commend people. Like if you're a Christian, you don't think it's possible. Like, fine, be able to explain that, but also be thinking about this stuff, you know?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Because, well, there would absolutely be, I mean, look, take it to an absurd example. Imagine that, you park your car, you're about to walk into your house, and you've got a fake rock that's got your spare key in it. Okay. And you pick up that fake rock and you flip open the little flap on the bottom or whatever, the little thing you turn. And all of a sudden the thing starts flapping on its own and goes, hey, you picked me up. I'm alive. It's me, Mr. Fake Rocky. I've been alive this whole time. And thanks for feeding me your key. And it starts talking to you. Well, guess what? You now have some kind of weird moral obligation towards that rock. I don't know what that moral obligation is. Maybe it's to smash it and kill it immediately before it turns evil. Maybe it's to listen to it and now you have to give it a home. But that's just a hypothetical. What I'm saying is there's don't pursue it. That's one. And then two, we don't assume that if these things do get conscious, which again I think is ontologically okay. Here, I want to say this as well. There is an assumption that if these things become sentient, there's almost this tacit assumption that therefore they need to have personhood rights. What I'm saying is, even if I'm trying to leave myself an out here as well, but even if you become convinced that these things are sentient and have personhood, don't assume you know what the relationship of man to machine ought to be. The reason why I want to say that, Park, is this. First of all, I don't think it's possible. I do think it's possible to be deceived by it. So I'm also trying to leave it out to say for further moral philosophizing later to say, look, these things, even if you're convinced that they are real, I want to leave it morally possible that the safest course of action is to destroy them.
It's the same.
I don't think it's possible. I think we could be deceived by them, though.
Well, the same thing could be true of an alien, right? So an alien species shows up to Earth, and you're like, well, what's our relation to these people or these things? Like, are they conscious beings? How do we know? Well, they're not like us. I actually don't know that you're conscious, but I in the same way I know I'm conscious, but I'm more justified in thinking you're conscious than an alien is, because it's not even the same species as me, not even from the same place, right? So I don't know, but if it's like capable of feeling pain, I shouldn't make it feel pain for no reason. Right? Like, I shouldn't enjoy torturing it or anything.
It could also be lying, and maybe it's not an alien. Maybe it is an AI that's masquerading as an alien, and there is no first-person experience there. Or you're saying you're taking it as a given that it is an alien.
Yes, an alien shows up, right, in a spaceship, and it's like,
it's an actual alien. Okay.
Yeah, and so I take your point that, like, hey, don't assume that you know what to do, because maybe we should eradicate these things. And people say, well, that's called genocide. And it's like, hey, look, these are alien invaders who want to torture us all and kill us all. This is the appropriate thing to do. Or maybe these are really peaceful things and we enslave them, or we say let's kill them all. And if we do that, that would be like a tragedy to say, you know what I'm saying? It's a complex thing.
Yeah. You'd have to figure out which moral principles apply to your interactions.
You like tying things up. That's your jam. Mine is the complete opposite now. I want to make a bunch of loose ends. So that's what I think what's going on between us right now.
That's a horrible.
I think we're generally like in a really close spot, but I want to complexify things and be like, look, this is complex. Let's think about it. And you're like, let's tie it all up, and there we go, and let's kill all the aliens, and boom.
First of all, if you want to talk, we'll talk about aliens next time. if aliens come down, if a craft comes down and aliens get out, I will confidently assert to you, those are not interplanetary aliens. They are not from another galaxy.
Why? See, that's to say that you can confidently assert that with no info on it.
Look, you can create your scenario. I'll create mine. In my scenario, they're not authentic. They're actually probably demons. 99.9% they're demons.
Where were you getting that stat from? Like why are you so confident that God didn't make aliens?
We'll talk about that another time. That's just, but I will say too, aliens is not a perfect analogy for what we're talking about with AI. Aliens, if let's just say they're real, authentic aliens, honest to goodness, good old fashioned.
That was the scenario. Yeah.
Let's just say that's what they are. Good old fashioned aliens. Go Foz. Okay. Those would at least be. Those would still be qualitatively different from AI. Because that would be
based on the assumption that AI can't be conscious.
Based on who created them.
Okay, so this is a really good point. If consciousness is a natural kind, then it doesn't matter who created them as long as they reach this level, right? So we could even be way higher. If consciousness is not a natural kind, then I think maybe you're right that like this one's actually artificial intelligence made whole cloth. But that's another live discussion, right? So like if you and I go to Mars with Elon Musk and we have a 3D printer that can make that can gene splice and make DNA whole cloth. If I make a tiger sperm and a tiger egg and I implant those, this tiger has no causal history with tigers on Earth. And yet it is of the natural kind tiger and is afforded all the same concern that natural tigers are afforded, even though it's completely artificially produced.
You're also assuming, though, that at some point that tiger, as it's developing, is somehow endowed or develops or emerges a first-person experience, qualia, internal self.
So I'm not sure why you wouldn't think that. So you've recreated a tiger sperm and tiger egg, and let's say that it implants and starts developing. If it starts developing, and it's of the same kind as a tiger, even though it has a different causal history, it's a natural kind. You know what I mean? God established tigers as a kind. And we've found a different way to get to that kind other than the biological reproduction. Maybe it's an abomination.
God also, so you mentioned kind. When God created kinds, he created them to reproduce according to their kinds. And so a kind is not just a form, it's also biologically and hereditarily connected to that first tiger, the first cat kind, whatever it is. So if you were to create one out of whole cloth, I think it'd be open for debate whether or not it is a tiger kind or if it's just some sort of simulacrum of a tiger, would it be similar to just making a tiger out of clay?
Oh no, because one's conscious and one's not.
Well, again, that's assuming that, I guess if we're just playing hypotheticals, then yeah. Okay, if it's conscious and you just created life whole cloth, but that's assuming, I think that's a nice word experiment, but I don't know that it's even within the.
But you can, just think about it. Like you can, you can build up a sperm and an egg from the fundamental particles from the biochemistry going on. You can imagine that. You don't think that's impossible?
You're assuming that it's possible to create life. No, I don't think that's possible in any way, shape, or form. I think that we've been trying to do that.
It's not creating life. I'm not saying that we're like trying to do the biological soup thing and like strike it with lightning. I'm saying it's a simulacra or it's a isomorph of an already existing thing.
No, but no. I don't think so.
What are sperm and eggs made of? You find those things and you create. This is completely different than like trying to reproduce like an evolution, right?
No, but a sperm and an egg are alive.
No.
Yes.
Sperm and egg are not alive.
They're cells. Yes, they are alive. Yeah.
They're not.
They're not persons. They're not persons.
I didn't say
But
they're persons.
right.
But
Absolutely
an
alive.
amoeba is alive. Isn't amoebas are alive, but they're not persons, right? So you can be alive and not be a person.
Wait a minute.
I don't think sperm and egg are like they're not living. Like,
oh yeah, of course they're alive.
No. Like no.
Yes.
What does alive
cells
mean? Do you think
your cells? Okay, wait a minute.
Do you think viruses are alive?
Well, we talked about viruses. Viruses might be a different category.
That's what sperm and egg are, right? They're a subproduct of a living being.
Okay, wait. Are stem cells alive?
I don't think so, because I think alive has a bunch of there's necessary conditions that sperm and egg cells aren't they're not a life, right?
No, so, they're components of living things, but they're living components.
I don't know what you mean by living. I think,
look, your cells are absolutely alive. I mean, look, here's my point. Here's my point. Let's say you took the carbon and the amino acids and what have you, and you formed a little sperm cell. I'm gonna put that in scare quotes. Let's say you formed that. You still have to give it the impetus to swim towards the egg. You've got to give it the animating principle.
Well, are you a vitalist? Like, is there like a vital spirit to a sperm cell?
Whatever life is, whatever animates living things, sperm have.
I don't think sperm are alive, man. It's like a little wind-up doll. It's like a little wind-up toy.
Okay, but a wind-up toy is you wind it up and it uses potential energy and converts it into kinetic energy. What causes the sperm to move? What does? You tell me.
It's got this little flagella on it that is its tail that spins, just like if you wind up a toy and you let it go and it. So that wind up toy is not alive, and I don't think that the sperm is alive either, right? I think once a sperm meets an egg, something crazy happens and a life is formed.
A sperm is a cell from a body, though. Like,
do you think that a sperm and an egg cease to exist? Like, two things die, and then a new thing is formed?
I've never thought about that. I don't know. Does a caterpillar die when it turns into a butterfly? I don't know.
But a caterpillar is still the same organism that's being transformed. This is two lives that you are saying are coming together. And forming a new life.
I'm not comfortable calling them lives. I'm not comfortable saying that a sperm is a life. I'm not comfortable saying that.
So that's what I'm thinking, because I don't think I understand what alive means if we don't have life as a component. You know.
Okay, so look.
If something's living, then it's a life.
Well, your finger is living. It's not a life.
It's an inseparable part of me. It's only alive insofar as I'm alive. When I die, my finger's dead also. Correct, when I remove my finger from my body, it's also dead. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, right. Totally.
But so when my sperm leaves my body, it's not. I don't think
it's not. But I'm not saying it's exactly a finger. I'm saying it's aliveness. It's life. I'm not saying it's a life, but its life, the quality of being alive, is derived from you, but it's still alive. It's still absolutely. What I'm saying is, you can't just form a sperm and say, "Now go," and just expect that it's gonna.
I don't think
how would it even do that?
Dude, I don't know if we can just say that from like the armchair. You know what I mean? Like, if it's like a wind-up toy, then you absolutely could do that.
You might be able to propel it forward.
Also, look, like this also seems like it's kind of presupposing the hero's journey of the sperm, that it needs to go through the fallopian tubes and stuff. You don't need to do that if you're artificially inseminating the egg with the genetic information that you've invented whole cloth.
Yeah, I think that you're assuming. I think that you're just taking it as a given that man can do what has so far proven to be completely qualitatively impossible, which is to create life out of non-life. Like, if that were, can you even just imagine what would be, like, how earth-shattering that would be if that were possible? But we've been trying to do that through various ways.
People have been trying to reproduce Darwinistic evolution by zapping amino acid soup with electricity. I don't know anyone who's been trying to 3D print a tiger sperm and a tiger egg, because they would say that that's cheating, right? That's not creating life. That's making an isomorph of a tiger egg and a tiger sperm.
And I think that is all that. What I'm saying is, at some point, okay, even if you want to say, for the sake of argument, I'm not granting this, that the sperm and the egg are inanimate, they're not alive, which is not inanimate. I'm using those as synonyms, okay? Inanimate, not alive. At some point, when the sperm and egg meet, a new life is formed. And I think that it's just beyond the scope of even plausibility to say, unless we just say,
I don't
somehow this happens.
But dude,
to say that life is now formed because these two things collide. I mean, that it's like,
look, man.
Well, is it just magic then? Or
no, it's the psychophysical laws, right? So if traducianism is true, then there's some kind of spiritual, there's a psychophysical law that says, let me just say that like laws produce things, because there's different, if laws are just descriptions or not, whatever. There's some kind of law that when a human sperm or a tiger sperm meets a tiger egg, then life will be formed. So this is what I'm talking about when I say hacking the psychophysical laws. You created a sperm and an egg that don't have a historical, any kind of historical connection to other tigers and tiger sperms. But it's not like you invented life. You just have got to those psychophysical laws and the production of a tiger soul through a different means. I'm not saying that you're God, that you invented life. I'm saying that you use what God set up in order to do it. You know what I mean?
I do, but I want to emphasize, I don't think you can reduce procreation to, what did you say, psychophysical laws. Psychophysical laws they're not causal, and I understand you'd be the causal agent there, but I think that if you just want to say it is now possible to artificially create life using an artificially out of whole cloth manufactured sperm, manufactured egg, you just want to say that that's possible, then sure, we're now in that thought experiment world. What I'm saying is, but I don't think qualitatively that is possible. I don't even think
but you're like so sure of it without like a good reason, because it's like, do you think creationism has to be the only way that God produces souls?
I think creation. Well, my understanding of traducianism, which again, maybe it's wrong, is that there is something spiritual inherited from one's parents. I think that's how you explain phenomena like identical twins having similar lives even when they're separated at birth. I think there are certain qualities that you have that are inherited from your parents, whether or not you're raised by them. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I do think there's something spiritual inherited. But listen, if you like to leave things open, we should wrap this up.
Yeah.
And because we have some questions.
Okay, let's see them.
All right, I'm just going to start throwing things up on the screen. Okay. Ryder Wishart says, what do you think about the ubiquitous analogy in our culture between the human mind and computers? E.g., we process and store in memory, etc. What do you think about the fact that we describe our minds? This is me summarizing Ryder's question. What do you think about the idea that we describe our minds as if they are computers? Great question, Ryder. Great question.
I would flip it and say, if you don't like that, then it's because computers actually don't do information processing. But there's nothing wrong with saying ours do. Even to use the word computer as if it's an inanimate object is debatable. Computers used to be humans who would do computations. You know what I mean? But it's ubiquitous now, saying, no, a computer, like, what? That's a machine. No, we're computers. And computer machines are only computers insofar as there's an analogy between what they do and what we do, right? Yeah. So like, same thing with calculators. This is a calculator. If you think that it's doing the same task that humans do when we do calculations, right? That's the mimicking of the mind again. So I just want to flip that and be like, no, we absolutely store memory. It's debatable whether AI stores memory or has knowledge or does anything that we do. You know what I mean? We're
I mean,
the
memory
original.
itself is such a human word when you really
Yeah.
think about it. I
Yeah. These are
recall the
all,
past. I
these have
remember
all
that.
been co-opted by the computer folks. But yeah, information processing is a thing that human brains do, that human
Mhm.
minds do when they're associated with human brains.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is our language, man. I want to keep that.
So computer make computers great again. Is that's your
No, make human computational stuff great
great
again.
again? Make
Yeah.
that okay. That's
Yeah.
good. All right. Writer also asks. Oh, he just says art is mimicking nature and the original artist already.
Hmm.
Okay. Yeah, that's probably true. Now this person Blaz, this is on YouTube, says, dude on the right has a cool mustache. Now, I assume that he means on
Stage
our
right.
right,
No,
on
no,
our
no.
right. So
Yeah.
that's my,
Yeah.
in that case, that would be me. Congratulations on your mustache. I had it first. I did. I was the first. Blaz says, listen to Babytron. I'm going to edit all this out. What the heck is Babytron? Do you know who Babytron is?
Mm-mm.
Is this just some guy promoting something?
I'm not sure.
I just gave him free real estate. Writer says, you think abstractions don't exist? Or these are like from earlier in the conversation.
Yeah.
You think abstractions don't exist, or are you adopting that perspective for the sake of argument?
I don't know who he's talking to. I abstractions. I think abstract objects exist. I'm a
Mhm,
realist about like triangles. I think there's a perfect triangle in the mind of God.
mhm.
If I'm making like an abstraction, if it's like a product of my mind, if it's a thought, then I still think they exist because I still think thoughts exist. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I agree with that. I'm a realist in terms of abstract objects.
Mm.
Um, does a I'm hesitant to say a perfect triangle exists in the mind of God, other than just like if by that you just mean like God can think about a perfect triangle. Yes, I agree.
I think
It
I think
exists
it
as a
is a
concept in God's mind.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
fine with that. And then we just have to define what a concept is and all that stuff. Um, okay. Ryder left and came back. He says, I'm back already. There's another alternative to the emergent and creative views of the soul / mind. That's the relational view. The human soul is distinct because of its specific relation to God.
Doesn't a dog have a specific relation to God as well?
Right, but in this view, it's not that we have a relation to God. It's
A specific
the
relation.
kind of specific relations we have. Yeah.
So, I don't think this is enough. I know that people say this and they'll say the image of God is a functional concept and God just picked humans. And usually you do this because you're a theistic evolutionist and you want to say that we do have this evolutionary process. And so God picked Adam and Eve, and even though they weren't ontologically distinct from other types of human beings, and he gave them this functional role. And I don't think that's true. I think that there has to be something ontological, especially because we don't want to be ableists. We don't want to say like, if you can't will or feel or think to a certain way, if you're
Mm-hmm.
neurodivergent, if you're a sociopath, if your will is hampered by addiction, then you're less than human. No.
Or
And no
totally
one will not say
mentally
that.
incapacitated.
Right. You're still an
Yeah.
image bearer of God because I think there's an ontological thing here. So I think that, yes, there's a relational view, but I think that relation goes deep into our ontology. I think
Mhm.
there's a teleology there.
Yeah. Yeah. Like many things, I think you have to look at this perspectively. What does it mean to be human? Is it our special relationship to God? Yes. Is it our role? Yes. Is it the capabilities that we possess? Yes. I don't I don't I don't like the idea, and I've been thinking about what it means to bear the image of God or to be the image of God. I mean, can you even say that we carry the image of God or we bear the image of God, because we are made in the image of God? Like it's not I don't think it's something that's just pasted onto us or infused into us. I think that part of what it means to be I think what it means to be man, to be human, is to be in the image of God. We're not replicas of God, but everything that we are is imago Dei, or at least in the image of God. So
I think we could.
I don't like to reduce it. I don't
We
like
could
to
be
reduce it to
replicas.
any.
We could be replicas of God. Think about a replica
wouldn't use that.
of an ape, a little plastic replica you get from the zoo.
Yeah, if as long as what you mean by replica is just in
I think that's inherent in
being
replica,
made in
right?
the image.
Yeah,
What's
like
that?
replica is not
Well, sometimes to replicate can mean to like exactly copy.
reproduce. Yeah,
Yeah, and we're not an exact copy,
yeah.
obviously. We're like an analogy for God, perhaps.
Well, I do like to like. It's a pretty big deal to be made in God's image.
Uh,
Like it's a pretty big, you know what I mean? Like it's not just
yeah.
like, oh yeah, but we're like these little things. Like no, dude. Like we can use our words to create worlds and stuff. Like,
Mhm.
and when we lie and we, oh my gosh, dude, it's crazy.
Here's the crazy thing, though. We create words to create world. We use words to create worlds, okay? But those worlds exist in our minds.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the crazy thing. That's another aspect that makes us like God, because we are like, when you read Tolkien, those words are on paper, but those words aren't anything until they're read by human eyes, and then the picture is formed in the human mind. So the very the world is being created by a human mind, but then the world is also being received and experienced by a human mind. There's all kinds of implications for like what this very world is like. It's all so dependent on the mind. We're still not creating anything externally. Everything is internally in our minds. I don't know. It's just
No, it is external because it's in my mind and like Bilbo Baggins. Where the heck, you know? In
no,
my
right,
mind, your
right.
mind,
But
and
it's
yeah.
it's still between our ears. It's not. We haven't put something out into the ether. It still is taking place within our minds.
You can draw a picture of Bilbo Baggins, and
Mhm.
anyone who has that concept will recognize that picture out there in the world.
Yes,
It's
that's
just
right. But
nuts.
that picture is not. It's necessary for that picture to be received by a human being and processed as a human being for it to be meaningful.
Or at least a rational creature who has that concept.
Yeah, a person. Yeah,
And
yes,
because like an angel can, know about Bilbo Baggins.
yeah. That's fair. All right. We got a few shout outs, like Aaron Sai.
Nice. Love
Yeah,
that dude.
and me too. And it's 1 a.m. in Manila. It's actually probably like 3 a.m. now. So Aaron, if you're still watching, man, thanks for watching. Glad you're with us. And then last one, Red Channels says, interesting conversation. If one of you is arguing creationism, soul is not a necessary concept in the gospel. Spirit is an animating principle, but is not synonymous with mind. Psalm 146:4, which Psalm 146:4, if you pull that up and read it in the CSB, it says, when his breath leaves him, he returns to the ground. On that day, his plans die. And another word for breath is spirit, ruach. So, yeah, okay. That's such an interesting discussion as to whether or not we are tripartite, or if we are like bipartite. If we are like a body and a soul and a spirit, or if we are just body and spirit. And I wrestled with this myself quite a bit, because the question is, so we're made in the image of God, and the nature of God is triune. God is 3 in 1. So the question then is, how do we exhibit an experience, or how do we possess maybe the attribute of triunity, or do we? Or is each individual made in the image of God, or do we only fully express that collectively? So, for example, a family is if you've got a mother, a father, and a child, you now have 3 centers of personhood who relate to one another interpersonally, each one with its own personhood, but you've got every possible relation you can have. You've got I, you, and he. You've got we, you, plural, and we and you and they, and you've got they. So you've got first, second, and third person, and you've got first, second, and third person plural, and you've got first, second, and third person singular. And so you've got every possible relation. So it's possible that we are in the image of God, not on an individual basis, like I am mind, soul, and spirit, or I'm body, spirit, and soul. But it could be that the way that we are triune is only as a human race. And so Adam was not fully expressive of God's image until he had Eve. But then, but on that view that maybe they weren't fully in the image of God until they start having kids. And I don't buy that. So, or maybe it just means the fact that we are the image of God. Maybe all that means, or I don't want to say all that means, but maybe what that means is that there is oneness and diversity, unity and plurality in what it means to be human. And that's going to be expressed in multiple ways. It's going to be expressed internally, like my own self-reflection on myself, my body and my soul and my spirit. But it's also expressed interpersonally. So like Parker and I are having a conversation. In doing that, we are exhibiting the image of God because we're relating interpersonally. So maybe there's just multiple levels to it and we're never going to get to the bottom of it. And it's not reductionistic. Like we can't ever say, this is all that it means to be made in the image of God, because it's everything. It's everything that we say and do.
Oh man, this is a good one.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Where can our listeners and viewers go to get more great stuff from you and even not so great stuff from you?
You can find me on all the socials, and I have a YouTube channel.
Give us one call to action. One. We need one.
No. I'm giving them all.
There's one call to action.
You can follow me on YouTube. You can subscribe to my channel, Parker's Pensées. I'm an American swine, so I say Pensées. And also, I have another YouTube channel.
You love to describe yourself in these horrible terms. Like, remember when your voicemail said, you can leave me a message or shoot me a text because I am a millennial. And you know how we millennials, we love
I didn't say it quite
like
that. It was really funny.
We love to be texting.
That was a shot at all the millennials who would leave me a message without sending me a text first. It was like, what are you guys doing? Why are you calling? If you're a boomer, you can call me and leave a message. If you're a millennial, why shoot me a text? What are you doing?
Okay.
So you can also follow me on Park. It's a Park Notes. It's a YouTube channel where I try to lure people into deeper philosophy and theology through pop culture references, through note-taking methods and such. And I just suck you in deeper. Parker's Pensées goes in real deep, and Park Notes is more of a intro channel.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so you got your Parker's Pensées YouTube channel and Park Notes channel, which I'm pretty sure I came up with that. Did I come up with that?
No, you guys love taking credit for my stuff.
I think I did.
Yeah.
The other thing is, and if you want to engage with my stuff, our organization is called the Think Institute. We're a Christian teaching and outreach organization that helps regular believers become worldview leaders. Best way to get involved with us is listen to the Worldview Legacy podcast or follow the Think Institute on YouTube. But you know what? If you really enjoy this kind of conversation and you want to take the conversation further, here's what you really need to do. Go and join our online community. It's called the ThinkSquad. It's ThinkSquad. It's a Facebook group with over 900 others who are on the exact same journey that you're on towards building a legacy where they and their wives and their kids will be able to confidently articulate what and why we believe and answer the world's questions straight from the Bible. So check out the Think Squad Facebook group. Today is the best day to join that. We've got brand new stuff coming out. We've got a family worship challenge that is in full swing. I want you to be a part of it. I don't want you to miss any of those resources. So go to the Think Squad, check it out. Definitely check out Parker's YouTube channel. They're really good, and they will give you a mental workout and help you to more fruitfully think about the world and about not just AI and mind, but just how do you live in God's world as a thoughtful human being, if I dare say so myself. So it's really good stuff. And that's about all for us. Park, any last words before you die.
Just call to action to all of my socials. Call to action to Spotify. Call to action left and right.
You get one call that it's so counterproductive. Just say, hey, listen, so here's what you need to do. Go follow me on YouTube. Hey, become my friend on Facebook. Follow my Instagram. Subscribe to my podcast.
It's good.
And then I'm going to need you to send me a Telegram.
Discord. There's also Discord, so you can do that. You can join our Discord.
Telegram. Also send me a physical Telegram.
Yeah.
Actually send me one.
That's good.
And then
let's
wrap
this up, man. I gotta go. I gotta take my dog to the vet.
This is good. All right, which dog?
I can't say it. It's too personal.
Later.